Okay,
I'm sure more people are going to come through on the Zoom.
I gotta get this.
Alvaro came and went. I guess he'll come back.
How do I get this? Not be the only thing to show.
where are you, Jeremy, these days?
I moved back to the UK in 2020. So yeah, I'm back at base near Manchester at the moment. Yes.
And are you still involved?
Am I what? Sorry.
Somebody has to know how to get this out of, like, this is frozen.
I was just curious about your Ibogaine involvement these
Oh yes.
days.
Finding about this
Every day Ibogaine. Every second of my life is
I wanna
Ibogaine.
put Zoom in a little box.
I know.
Doing lots of stuff. Yeah, we're opening a clinic in the Bahamas.
I need to go into a
First licensed legal clinic.
There it is.
Hey, Jeremy. How
Are
you
you
doing?
okay, Toby?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just in bed.
Yeah.
Hey, Claire.
Clarita.
Claire.
Everybody,
How are you, Claire?
I'm good. It's hot as Hades here, but can't complain. How's
Where
everybody
did
else?
Lakshmi go?
She's
I
there.
see her right there.
She's right in the center for me. She's the center of everything.
Ah, yes.
You guys are staying
It
awake.
should be in your inbox now.
It looks like 3 a.m. for Toby.
Yeah, your
Yes.
the Wi-Fi.
Is this Zoom at the church?
So
Somebody know the Wi-Fi.
You know, you
here?
froze. You froze. So I don't know if we can handle everybody being on video. I think we might need to turn off our videos and the person who's talking be on video.
Yeah,
seems to be okay at the moment.
yeah.
Yeah, but if it's
Yeah, sure.
yeah, that's-
Yeah.
Are we at the church? Where is this Zoom? Anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Well,
I asked Dana where he is, but I don't think he heard me.
I'm trying to get the Zoom off.
I guess it's that place in the Lower East Side, wherever it was.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of the process.
I thought we would be where the memorial was.
well,
Yeah.
he's trying to point at this is an experiment in doing
Somebody.
virtual and live, and he's trying to point to another computer at the room so that that'll show up on this
I can
gallery
mute that.
in the room. That's what's working on right now.
Okay.
Hey, Alvaro.
Hi, Alvaro.
Hello.
Alvaro.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Incognito today or tonight. Yeah, Alvaro.
He's wearing his smoking jacket.
Has to be, yeah. Not wearing proper attire.
Are you you're in Sintra, Alvaro?
Yeah.
Folks, I have to take you off the main sound system here. So you can still talk to yourselves, but the idea will be that the people from, the boxes on the wall here will go live and talk to the room at a certain point so you can address the room. I don't have the person streaming the video yet, but maybe I can set that up. This
Well, Ken is there. I can call Ken and ask him to zoom in.
No, you don't. You don't. No. We got it under control here.
What's the Wi-Fi?
Dana's looking very smart.
Terrific flower,
Yeah,
lower kids.
presentation. Looks like there's going to be a presentation behind him.
Boaz has got a slideshow apparently.
Do you want me to find it for you? That'd be very nice. That's the.
I want to see
Yeah. You know, the first time I met Dana,
Noah and everybody.
first time I met Dana, I was jet lagged, arrived in Manhattan. He walked me however many blocks it is to the LGBT center.
Put that video.
I
The
didn't know
first
what was
time you
going
met
on.
Dana? What?
Yeah. First time I met him. Immediately we had to walk for about an hour to the LGBT center. And he said, pretend you're gay, pretend you're gay, pretend you're gay. For one of his ACT UP meetings. I was like, okay, I'll pretend I'm gay.
That looks good. There's the room.
That looks cool there.
So let me see if I can make the room.
I
Let me try.
expect this event to.
Probably better to do the
Oh, there we
single.
go. There they are. Oh, cool.
Well, there's food. You go around through here and you can get like food. Some people are hungry. And
There we go.
feel constrained, but you have to stay here and listen to everything.
New York.
Nice flower arrangement. That's epic.
My name is Dana.
It's called Earth Church.
Probably everybody here knows who I am, so it's not really necessary to
E-R-E.
dwell on that.
So
But
E-A.
I thought this was a really great place to have a memorial for Bob Sisko because of being next door to where he used to live in the heyday of the early Ibogaine movement. Ibogaine didn't happen all at once. It kind of happened in like little jerks and starts. Probably the most significant thing is that Ed Rosenthal introduced me to Howard Lotso. And that was actually 9 months before he told me about Ibogaine. Contrary to like the impression that may exist today, it was a piece of information that nobody talked about. Now it's talked about, right? But it wasn't talked about back then at all. So somebody could tell you something and you could remember it, but nobody would give you any feedback, any encouragement to even remember what it was called. And it was, Ibogaine was something that was literally a legend in the 60s. Nobody had any. It was supposed to be somewhat like Harmony, which is the basis of ayahuasca. But Howard Lotso told me about it a week after this resigned. He said, there was this drug that got me off of heroin overnight. Now, why I didn't like immediately jump on it and say, well, we got to get some of this and see if it really works, which would be the logical response. Beats me, I certainly needed it. I mean, there were people in the 6 years when we didn't do anything that needed it for detox. And that particular person at that point was a big emergency. They needed detox really bad. We couldn't do anything for them. But it would have meant going to Africa, getting Ibogaine. Scenario that Bob and Howard and Norma followed later when they went to Africa in 1987. So it got to a point it's like one of those episodes where there's a big argument about something. In this case, it was an argument about heroin machine.
Dana, can I just interrupt? Dana, can I just
Heroin is not
interrupt for a second?
but you
Dana,
actually have
can
to
I-
have something.
Can I interrupt for a second? If you turn that camera to face you,
Beginning of December.
it
I
will be
came out
easier
with
to
some money
hear.
In 1980, and the Ibogaine project was formally launched. It would not have succeeded without Bob Sisko. Because you needed somebody to be in there working on it constantly. And I wasn't working on anything constantly. I was doing all kinds of things. So, I think in 1985, Bob got the patent, the first patent for heroin. And some people said, of course, you're like accommodating big pharma. You're acting like them, right? But later, when we actually went to talk to government, we had the patent hold. It's not like a drug deal. You have a patent. You have a patent hold. And I think that Sisko, with his ability to turn a phrase, you know, Howard had a problem writing a patent and he went to him and said, how do we say this? I think Sisko had a role in that. I can't say for sure because I'm not able to ask you. But there's a video that is out called Ibogaine in the 90s. At the end of that video, there's Bob Sisko in front of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And they said, how long did it take you to get off cocaine? And he said, 48 hours. That still exists. You can look it up on YouTube. There's lots of traces of Bob Sisko. You know, there's no like film of his life. But he left a lot of record. He created a lot of media. He was really good at creating media. He was good at coming up with campaign ideas for campaigns to promote his latest idea. And through the stuff that happened, through, you know, the '90s when, you know, Ida turned its back on Ibogaine, Howard ended up working for a while with Stan Thick. Sisko kept that like
approval and we want.
And, you know, we worked it out so there was treatment available in Holland. And he started working on, you know, the problem of getting Ibogaine. And started, well, it was NDA International. They had a place in Montreal. And they had an exception for Ibogaine. It's kind of like one of those plant supplement things. And later, the health cabinet completely freaked out and said, we made a mistake. This is much more dangerous, serious than we thought. But, you know, we were able to do it for a number of years. And in around about 2009, 2008, Slater and Frith stopped producing Ibogaine. That was the Ibogaine that, you know, everybody was using or getting it through Eric Town. And Bob Sisko went to work to get Ibogaine, not only to get Ibogaine, to get GMP Ibogaine, which means that it's actual manufactured at an FDA approved plant. It's, again, it's not in the jungle, it's not in a clearing, it's not a drug deal. if you want to actually do anything serious in the world today, you have to have that GMP manufacturing. So he had for a while the best ibogaine, and he had to pay more for it, right? But it was GMP, and a lot of people swore by it. And there are people, you gotta understand, there are people in Baja that were charging $5,000 to $7,000 for treatment. So whether they're paying an extra $75 per gram doesn't really matter to them. They want to make certain it's ibogaine. They want to make certain that it's medically good ibogaine. So everything was coasting along, and then Bob came up with the idea of having a supplement, which is like a little pill from ibogaine, microdosing. See, who was ahead of the microdosing trend too. So he came up with a microdose, and a lot of people loved it. Jonathan Dickinson put it on the website of PETA. Health Canada freaked out. Now, in 4 milligrams, which is all we're talking about, there's just no potential for anything to happen with heart. You have to have at least 200 milligrams to start having stuff happen with heart that could be potentially a problem. But they hauled us in and had Sisko sign a piece of paper that he would not sell in Canada anymore without written permission. It had to be a clinical trial. And he was somewhat talked into a thing where people said, we're going to have a clinical trial, so it's ibogaine. Right. They should have done that. That was right when he was getting a mild cognitive impairment. And he just kind of trusted on fate, and this fate would have it. They had an adverse event right away, practically. Within the first few months, they had an adverse event in Vancouver. Nobody died. The woman's still alive, and she isn't on heroin today. She was on 3 grams of heroin a day. She is on heroin today. But they banned our supplement. And they took away the established position that Howard Lossoff's company had had in Canada for 10 years. And we never got that back. I'm trying to get it back today. You know, we're trying to manufacture GMP ibogaine in India. We'll see if we can do it. But there's a patent that I am working on to get it to get a version of the energy pill patented. And to do it, we have to mix it with something. We have to mix it with CBD. But that will probably work better for Parkinson's. And if that patent gets approved, Bob Sisko's name will be on the patent as the inventor of a superior treatment for Parkinson's. I work on it every day. You can help me. But you want to say a few words?
I'll welcome people.
Yeah, let's let him welcome.
Dana Beal, thank you so much. I feel like that was one chapter in a Dana audio book that could continue very soon. You know, later in our gathering here. But thank you. You are the carrier of the flame. We're honored to be asked to host this memorial to Bob Sisko. We are the Earth Church here, and we have a relationship to, a direct relationship to people who find healing in the earth. here in the time of the sixth extinction, when the Earth is accelerating a rapid evolution, which is causing great mortality and great life at the same time, a speeding up of the process of life. It is very confusing for all of us, but especially confusing for people who are locked into various kinds of fundamentalistic approaches to living. And you know, when Dana told me that Bob had lived through the wall here, it really felt like it made sense to just gather here with Noah, with Bob's son, and gather memories. And in remembering this moral life character who traveled the world, made friendships throughout the world, traveled through all kinds of cultures, all kinds of ecosystems, and you know, very much like Ginsberg and Burroughs going to Peru, looking for, having the intuition that there might be some kind of magnetic, chemical, vegetable world solution to problems. He and Howard, and this magic circle of people that Dana talks about, they just walked off the edge of the cultural cliff. They were willing to go for miles without getting a pat on the back from any major institution. When you think about it in the age of consumerism right now, that's a lonely venture. I think there was more of a tradition of that years ago, but right now, it's consumption. Let's turn off the devices, okay? I don't want to battle the devices. Amen? This is not about devices today. Amen. I'm not going to say devices are the devil exactly, but sometimes I feel close to that. Pointing a finger and calling somebody a devil is done altogether too much right now in our society. But the somehow opening into this fossil fuel addicted, advertising addicted, neoliberal capitalistic addicted, fundamentalist religion addicted world that we live in right now. So disappointing. We're just coming off of that week of the Supreme Court really turning into fascists. They were always fascists, but they had a decision to do it just last week. And the upside of that was that we were all out on the streets again. It was like Black Lives Matter. It was like Occupy Wall Street. It was like Standing Rock. It was reclaiming public space. The police had to back away. It was illegal. I think, didn't Giuliani say if there are more than 22 of us congregated at the same time to a single purpose that we had to have a permit? Am I right? Wasn't that one of his, went down, I remember he went to a statue, a group of African-American people who were gathering to talk about a troubled brother. And they were trying to figure out what to do about a troubled brother. And they arrested them all, put them in handcuffs. When something like what happened 2 weeks ago happens in New York City, it's such a relief to me. The public commons has been so methodically privatized, and suddenly we're all out there, and we're creating new language, we're creating new relationships, we're creating new culture, and for that time, those institutions are not in control. And that's what Bob Sisko did. He was making networks of friends. He was making language. He was creating, he was a Boolean. He was full of life. He was encouraging contact that was outside of the fundamentalism of consumerism. We cannot forget him because he was like a public commons. He was like a walking park. You could walk into the proximity of Bob Sisko and you could have any kind of conversation. And after a while, he'd be proselytizing something he believes in. You can bet he combined play and work and play all the time. Am I right? Somebody give me a Sisko Luya here. Yeah. Am I right? Yeah, all the time. Right. Praise be. And that's a public comment. When you can't divide work from play. That the work and play divided, that's the beginning of Puritanism. That's the beginning of fundamentalism. That's the beginning of what makes possible this formalized fear that has victimized us so severely in recent years and months. You know, when you pick up when you have a certain kind of conversation, or you pick up the journal of an artist who was hard at work in the 60s and 70s, or even in the 30s and 40s, 20s, you pick up there was an ebullience, there was a rising, there was an assumption that human beings are going to find a way to get better. We were going to improve. There was a general optimism right all the way through fascism of World War II and the monarchism of World War I, right through these episodes that we feel like we're edging toward right now. There was a I don't like the word hope anymore, but whatever that word that we want to replace the word hope is. Am I right? Yeah. That word. Bob had that word. That word is more difficult to get to and more difficult for us to say it to each other, more difficult for us now than ever before us. It's we just have to, I saw there was a collision. It was a perfect yippee moment. There was a collision of the big women's march coming up from Washington Square, which somehow my 12-year-old daughter ended up kind of leading with Letitia James. She left our house in Brooklyn and said, "I'm going to go to the march." We said, "Okay, call us, take care of yourself, be safe." And then we saw her on NBC News. She was like up at the front with a big sign standing next to Tish. And they went up Fifth Avenue. And Savitri and I, the parents, we joined Rollerina and the drag queens. And at one point, there was a collision between the women's march and the drag march. And I just thought of the pranksters. I thought of the yippies and the zippies. I thought of that whole tradition that had a whole city block of Burning Man claims. That whole tradition of breaking open culture and falling through space. And as you fall, you evolve, and you evolve wings. The drag march colliding with the rise of the feminine. It was perfect. And then that when the two marches collided at 9th Street, the drag march starts over in Tompkins Square on 9th Street and goes towards Stonewall. And the women's marches from Washington Square to Times Square. And we met at the corner of 9th and 5th Avenue. And at that point, there were people calling out. It reminds me of Bob calling out each other's names in the different parades. And sure enough, some people swapped parades. They superseded. They went beyond their own horizons. People were calling out friends' names instead of being angry that parade is the wrong issue. We have a lot of that now, don't we? There was a coalescing, a transcendence issue, and there was a thing that happens. You see, when the earth heals us, when Ibogaine heals us, we become beyond issues. We're not locked into a fundamentalism. We don't have our little justice issue. We're over here writing grants with a particular kind of language, right? A particular kind of priesthood writes a grant to get money from another group of priests in that issue, am I right? That are over in that building over there, and they have a cabal. They have a cultural cycle that they make money and so forth. When you are cured by Bob's help, you are free. You are beyond issues. We're beyond the Puritanism of exclusive justice struggles. Amen. And that's the earth talking. That's the earth working through us. That's when Bob's lesson to us is that we are the earth. We're made of the earth. Am I right? We got the earth in us. We got nothing else. You know, we can wrap ourselves in plastic. You know, we can torture the earth until it's a polymer, until it's something that's unrecognizable. You know, too much CO2 in the air. You can kill yourself by taking something that's already in the air and making too much of it, which is what CO2 is. But we've been given a lesson of freedom by Bob Sisko. And so, Bob, you are among us. You are here. You are in us. You have become your admirers. You have become people who have learned your lesson. Ibogaine is something to apply in everyday life. There's something every 5 minutes of our life where we can use it now. Apply the Ibogaine lesson to fixing breakfast, to caressing a loved one, to walking down the street, to singing a song, to saving money, to doing really prosaic things. The adventure of Ibogaine doesn't have to be performing King Lear. It's ordinary. The earth is in us all the time, even in this time of terrible emergency. As we talk, so many people are, so much mass mortality is taking place in the global south in particular. And the earth is cast by these stupid news people as some kind of menacing adolescent. It's out of control. The superstorms and the floods and the starvation and the heat waves. If you listen to the news, we have nothing to do with it. We're just receiving these tragedies. And then that's the news, and it's there for 4 minutes, and then we're on to commercial programming. And it turns out that middle-class people up here in New York had nothing to do with it. That's the way the news represents it. You have to wait for 3 years and get a lecture from, what's his name, Guterres, the General Secretary of the United Nations, to understand that we have something to do with climate change. It's every moment. It's every moment. That's what Ibogaine is. That's what Ibogaine is. It's in us. It's in us now. And being around Bob, he reminds us of that, because he lets it all those years, he let it flow out of his body. You weren't going to stop him talking about saving lives. The American Medical Association wasn't going to stop him. The Food and Drug Administration wasn't going to stop him. The modern political parties were not going to stop him. And we cannot be stopped either. I just want to be grateful to Bob here. You know, I'd like to just ask Noah to come up here. Are you here, Noah?
Yes.
Where are you? Can you just come on up here? Thank you. Come on up here.
I'm the son of Bob Sisko. My name is Noah. Unfortunately, my father has passed away, as you all know. He was a great man, underground historical figure. He had many friends. He traveled the world. As a young man, he hitchhiked down to the John F. Kennedy funeral, and then later to various places, California, all over. He hitchhiked around the United States. He held various jobs in England. He was a gardener. He worked on an Icelandic fishing boat. But his main passion for over 30 years was the medicalization of Ibogaine. He ran with Howard Lotsoff and Norma Lotsoff a underground railroad where they were treating hundreds of addicts. And I got gotta tell you, the people that came were absolute zombies. And when they came out, these were very hardcore drug addicts. When they came out, it was like a new person. I didn't even recognize them. And that's when I knew that Ibogaine worked, and it was something that was a great gift to humanity. My father, he went from running the Underground Railroad to eventually producing the world's finest GMP grade Ibogaine that helped thousands of people. He began through his Canadian corporation, along with other corporations that he had set up in many different countries, supplying the clinics. So he went from the beginning to the end, full circle. And my father, he knew a lot of great musicians and poets and stuff. He had a song for you when you came. He had a song for you when you left. And he would recite poetry, and he would give somebody the shirt off his back. He would have no money. Somebody asked him for money in the street, he'd find a couple of dollars to give him. He was a very generous person, and he accepted people for their faults. And he had a very interesting way of looking at life. I lived with my father as a young man, and then as an old man, he lived with me. And he had an appreciation of art, and previously had a tremendous music collection. And his heart was always in Gabon, with the Guidi, and he was a religious man, and he was an observant Jew, and he really believed in the Ibogaine. He loved his Iboga Plus products, which many of you may have tried to enjoy. That was excellent, and it turned out to be very useful in treatment of Parkinson's disease. He had many patents and licenses all around the world, and he was advocating for medicalization of Ibogaine and for treatment clinics. And he believed in treatment on demand, along with Howard Lotsoff. And he believed that somebody who had an alcohol or drug problem should be able to walk into a hospital and put down their insurance card or pay cash, or maybe even be treated for free, and they could get that help, that they would have that choice to take the Ibogaine. I don't know if you know how Ibogaine works, but it makes your brain move a lot faster, makes you a lot smarter. And the effects last years, but the speed up of the brain is maybe at least 6 months. It's like, you know, spraying out the cobwebs of your brain with WD-40. It's a wonderful substance, and it helps people, and it enriches their lives. It extends their lives. It gives people their lives back. People have taken Ibogaine, they'll have that Iboga glow, like they've been reborn. It really is a miracle drug, and it should be more widely available. Unfortunately, people stole his technology, they counterfeited his product, and he never really reached the historical status that he should have. Although my father was a very humble man, and he did not want the limelight. He used to have a joke: no pictures, no autographs, no interviews. That was his joke. But what he gave to humanity was a tremendous benefit in terms of harm reduction, even crime reduction. Anybody knows anything about drug addicts know they need $300-400 every day. Guess where they're gonna get it? From stealing, burglarizing, cars, everything. So when you take somebody like that off the streets and put them into a normal environment, they're getting back into society, the crime's going down. And, you know, he did a lot of good things. He saved people's lives. He reconnected people with their families. He did benefits for people when people died, you know, celebrations of their lives. He did a lot of very good and important things for many people. He was involved in politics, religious person. He did a lot of different things. He was involved in writing, producing things. He produced a CD. He was involved in a clemency campaign, and he was in a movie. The movie was Fragile. He was quoted numerous times in various scientific journals. And my father was an educated man, a well-read man, and he was a good man. And we're all joined together here today to celebrate his life. And what a wild life it was.
Yay, Sisko and Erica, look
his hat, that was his home.
Cisco forever. Everybody
Yeah.
around him. Cisco forever. Come on. Cisco forever.
He was a lot of fun. Those who knew him in the 80s, 90s, 70s, you know, he partied like a rock star. He used to have a joke that he got from somebody. He said, if I would have lived so long, I would have known to take better care of myself. That was the kind of logic that he had. And unfortunately, all that fast living did catch up with him a little bit at the end, but he was on a wild roller coaster for 40 years, and he fought and he worked so hard to try to bring this Ibogaine about. And in an alternative world, he would have had it, and he would have been a rich man, but unfortunately he died with possessions and just a few dollars. But that didn't matter to him. He wanted to make change, and he changed things in different governments, and he pushed NIDA. He tried to get laws passed. He really worked tirelessly, and he put all his free money into these various companies that he was part of or working with to try to medicalize Ibogaine and to try to get it out to as many people that needed it as possible. And he worked, you know, for 30 years, you know, 8, 10, 18 hours a day. He was doing it. He was putting all his free money into this project because he believed in it, and he believed in loving one another. And he was just a very special person, you know, one of a kind. And the new generation might not understand it, but they don't make them like they used to.
Oh, that's what, Tim. I want to tell you, this man was like the fourth member. This was the medic. When this man joined, the team became complete. Oh, that's what, Tim.
I get very emotional very easily these days with Sisko's passing, and another friend from Holland, Marcel Repeat. He was also a Dutch pioneer in medical cannabis, so it's been a very difficult moment. So sometimes you meet people and they change your life. In 1985, I was working for the Israeli Embassy in Washington. And then a friend of mine came by, Sisko, and Sisko was going to go to the Gabonese embassy to get some Iboga batch, and they stayed over. That was the first time I ever met a drug addicts. Spent some time. I was a pretty much a drug version at the time. Say that. And he was talking about Ibogaine and how about Howard and Norma, and I said, "Wow, this guy is off the wall. He was doing you know, all kind of drugs all the time." And then I saw him again 3 months later. I saw Sisko 3 months later. I was in Washington. I came to New York. And I couldn't believe it's the same guy. It was just you know, unbelievable. Like he stopped the 3 main drugs that he was doing, you know, and the negative side effect of his Ibogaine treatment, he became ultra orthodox, you know. That's I'm joking. And he was very smart. He was very dedicated, and introduced me to Howard and Norma and Dana, and I saw a group of activists that had this mission to save the world with this holy African shrub. It sounded really fantastic. It still is, you know, that you take a holy plant from Gabon, start giving it to drug addicts in the West. And Sisko was very well organized. Had, you know, when we started going to from New York to Amsterdam to Rotterdam, actually, sometimes we worked in Rotterdam with the squatters. They had a lot of heavy drug use, and then we went to Rotterdam can see in the computer over there, we stayed at like half stars hotels, Orion Hotel, where we did the treatments. And we did case studies. And these case studies were basically the foundation that later on we submitted data to NIDA. And we went to, Howard and Sisko and Norma and myself, we went to pharmaceutical companies in Wall Street. It wasn't that far from here, Wall Street. It's a million miles away, actually. So they said, so what's your business model with Ibogaine? So, we give it once and the guy walks out and he's got new life, or maybe twice in his lifetime. So that's all. I mean, that's not a business model, How can you make business with this? With medical cannabis, you get 30 grams every month. This is a business model, they come back with methadone, you got a business model, they come back every day. With Ibogaine, which is, it's a major issue in psychedelics. And then we went to Rotterdam and Howard met the scientist who gave him some Iboga Jolage, and he says, we see this tremendous effects of Ibogaine on opiates, cocaine, and on methadone addicts. Maybe you could try it in some mice and see if we can repeat this. This is usually the other way around. When you do pharma development, first you do the animals, the dish, the animals, and then you go into humans. Here we saw tremendous results in humans, and he asked him to verify it in the animals, and which he did. This guy, Jones, who was the first guy at the Erasmus University, and then the studies started to pile up. The effects of Ibogaine, the elimination of morphine, the effects of Ibogaine on drug cessation and cocaine and so on. And Howard and Sisko and we all, that's how I got my education in intellectual property also, with these guys. Howard registered all these 5 patents. They all expired, by the way, unfortunately. And we tried to raise money. There was no money until we got this FDA approval for phase 1. Then Deborah Mesh ran out of money. Yeah, I know. Howard wasn't, or Sisko were not people of trying to control everything. You gave birth to a movement of healing, and then it's splintered to hundreds of pieces. And anyone who's taken Ibogaine says, I want to save the world, myself. And they would start a clinic. And sometimes they were really shabby clinics. And sometimes they were good clinics. And our role, and Howard and I put together this Ibogaine treatment manual, and we push safety as a #1 issue in the Ibogaine movement. Of course, with Sisko, the safety of the patient is more critical than the outcome of the treatment. And we met here in 3rd Street between C and D, between Coke and Dope. Yeah, that was a joke. And in the basement, and we met the drug users. We explained to them about Ibogaine. Sisko had all these files, he was very orderly all the time, with writing and so on. And without him, the movement would not have been possible with his dedication. And the money that he provided through, the business, it wouldn't have been possible. And he kept everybody alive. And he always gave people who need extra money. I always say if he would have invested that money in the real estate in the late 80s, he would be here like owning probably half of Avenue C. But he didn't. He spent it on Ibogaine, on the patents, on helping Howard and Norma and everybody else. And he was very special. So he's like, we all became very, very close. We came to Israel. He wanted to he came to Israel a lot of times. One day I was waiting for him with my friend of mine in the airport in a VIP room, pay $100 and wait for him. So we wait for him, and Sisko is coming off the plane, and we wait and wait, and he doesn't show up. So as it turned out, a police dog, sniffing near his legs, marked him for an ounce of cannabis, bringing into Israel, which was not the smartest thing in the world. I mean, like, we had some cannabis waiting for him in Israel, So the police guy who caught him came by and says, you're the two guys waiting for this guy from America. And in the way there, we see Sisko with his pants down and the police dog next to him. And I shouted to Sisko, Sisko, tell him it's for your asthma, which was true. He was asthmatic, it's for medical purposes. So they brought in this police officer, and he says, we're going to put him in jail now for 6 months for drug smuggling. He says, you can't even put him in jail, he's got asthma, he can die in jail, God forbid, So he says, we're going to kick him out of Israel and he'll never be able to come back. He says, you can't do this, he's Jewish, he wants to make aliyah, So what are you going to do? You can't kick him out, He's like, maybe, so anyhow, they got a lawyer and they kicked him out. It took him many years till he was able to come back. He had a great sense of humor, and when he was a tzaddik, a real tzaddik, a virtuous man, And I learned from this group, from Sisko and Howard and Norma and Dana and all the Lower East Side group, all this activism tactics, how to manipulate the government and how to the media and so on. And I used it in Israel to medicalize cannabis and to push clinical study in Israel. They don't make them anymore like they say, but it's not true. It's a new generation up and coming. We don't want to depress the new generation. You're wonderful, but you have responsibility to influence your future and take this work forward. Okay? And I love you all and thank you very much.
Well, can we open it up for memories of Bob? Somebody want to tell a story in 5 minutes? Here he comes.
All right, 2 or 3 words. No, I would say 2 or 3 words.
Hey.
Yeah,
2 or 3 words,
This is one of your biggest fans.
Hey, everybody.
Barbara's one of your biggest fans. You know that, right? All right.
Hey, guys, this is Don.
Oh, here he comes.
Oh, that's not fair.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Here we go.
I'm normal lot, so that's not a big deal. Sisko was the brother I never had. I always considered him my big brother, even though I was older than he is. And I'll miss him. I mean, I will really miss him. So will Joni. I see you back there, Joni. You better get up here and talk about Sisko. Okay. Because I'm not too great about talking in front of audiences. No, I said a few words. That's a few words.
Are we taking online
I don't
comments?
know if we have a microphone. Do we have a microphone?
Not shy.
Is there a microphone?
I can do without one.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure, Rob. Hey, the first time I met Sisko was when he came in from Belize. I think it was winter of '76. He was living literally on a loft or a couch at 9 Bleecker at the time. But bringing Sisko into the fold was a good time, especially when it came convention time. You know, we have Rob Ruskin who's there, who's a witness to this. Like the day we were at the Right to Life protest in Central Park, just before the Democrat convention. It was the yippies, the gays, and the majority of the feminist rag. And the Right to Life were Catholics. So Ben goes ahead and says, abort the Pope, better late than never. Abort the Pope, better late than never. Then these Catholic cops attack Ben. You know, and knowing Ben, he liked to stick the microphone up to the cop's mouth instead of to grab him into screwing up. Anyway, the Protestant cops, we got him out. So nothing. So you know, it was a Maisel thing, playing one cop against the other. But now going to Sisko. Now let's skip over a few weeks to the Republican convention. We were riding around Kansas City with a big paper-mache head of Jerry Ford going from Penn Valley Park to Camp Arena, where we do our protest. Sisko drove a whole bunch of us from New York City via Columbus to Kansas City to give hell to Jerry Ford, Reagan. It was a lot of fun. Skinny dipping on the way, grabbing ditchweed out in Kansas. I know the guy who turned us on to it. You know, let's just say his wife was sitting. He was the guy who turned us on to the ditches back in '76. And then, of course, riding around between Kansas City, Madison, and New York with the school bus. Ironically, we never, to the best of my knowledge, we never got stopped by the van. We could have really gotten out big, but it was a good time. You know, Sisko driving us to give hell to Reverend Moon that day in DC. You know, I remember we had a smoking. Then I took a crew, thanks to Sisko driver, and we snuck in with a banner saying, Reverend Moon's a CIA goon. And then there's Dana carrying on, yelling out the window, Moon's a goon.
Yes, that's true.
Yes. Yeah, we're all yelling, Moon's a goon, running on, because what the Moonies did, they brought all these people of color down from New York and DC, offering them free chicken dinner to hear Reverend Moon. But the thing is, Sisko did help start the house in DC. Casey House, 1007 Casey. There was the DC Yippie House. In cooperation with Stephen D'Angelo, the last prisoner movement. And you know, and as a result, we had some great smoke-ins in DC. Anyway, I miss Sisko. I mean, I never took the Avenue, so I never needed Jim, but somebody may have snuck something to me because I turned food down now. So maybe somebody gave me some, I pulled a root or some sneaker because I refused to eat the garbage they have at the nursing home. You know? So the thing is, blame it all on Sisko. Don't blame Ibogaine. Sisko gave it to us. Okay.
You want to come up and speak?
I do. Good driving now. My name is Joni Frieden, and Sisko was one of my dearest friends, longtime friends. And I'm going to tell you how I met Sisko. I come to New York and I was over at number 9 Bleecker Street working Dana and typesetting stuff. And I needed a place to sleep, and over the kitchen was a loft, with a bed up there, and a chair, and a table. and it was dusty. So I spent 2 days washing it all down and cleaning it all up, and finally got a nice linens and everything, and went to sleep. And about 2 in the morning, this guy crawls into bed. And I look over and I said, "Who are you?" He goes, "Well, this is my room." I said, "No, this is my room. I clean." He goes, "No, it's my room." He goes, "You're a nice present." And I looked at him, and that's how I met. He told me his name, and that's how I met Sisko. The second thing I remember, one time he came over. I was roommates with David Boyle, who I live now. And we didn't have a sofa in the room. Sisko comes over and he says, "Hey, this friend of mine's selling a really nice green white striped sofa. It's really comfortable. I think people should buy it." So we went and bought the sofa. It was $25. Sight unseen. He said, "I'll get it here." He brought it over. What I didn't know was that the sofa came with Sisko. He'd been sleeping in it. So he spent like several months sleeping in there until he found a place, to live. He was, he was quite a guy. I really miss him.
That was the finagle factor.
Yeah, that's true. It was all right with me. One time, Norma, Howard, and myself and Sisko, we went up to Canada to treat a couple of patients. And we got up there and we did something. They were teaching me how to treat patients. And we had a great time. And then I think Howard and Sisko decided that I should try Ibogaine. And they gave me a little bit of it. And I went out there communing with bucks and whatever else we did. Ibogaine was a big, big part of our lives. I bought stock in the company. Sisko convinced me it's a great idea.
You never got rich.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff. I just lived a quarter of a mile from my place. And I used to go over there and hang out with him pretty regularly. I'm going to miss him. There's more stories.
Well, I'm just going to announce, there is food and back, and if a few people could want to go back, start filtering back one at a time and make yourself a sandwich. That won't take too many people out of the audience. But yeah, go ahead. Who is next? Ken?
Yeah, well, I've known Sisko only since when he was still on 3rd Street around the corner, and I met him at some art opening, and he told me everything he was doing, and I was so impressed. I'm like, this guy's really saving the world. This is amazing. So I came to the house, and it was just like, it started with that. Also, especially the day when Obama got voted, and I was going to visit him, and then I remember on the street, there was such screaming and something, Obama's chosen. So I come up there, and it's on the TV, and we're watching, and then he says, it's like, we had a good campaign years ago. It was nobody. It's vote for nobody, and it was like it was like this best. I mean, one of you guys certainly knows everything about nobody will do whatever you need to get done. Nobody will fix the economy. Nobody, something like that. It was so good, and it was nobody for president. Nobody for president. I mean, that was for me was like the best thing I ever came across, and often learning about this way of thinking and the activism in America. And when I didn't have a home, he always had a couch for me. And he was always super respectful, so respectful, like he would never take advantage or disadvantage. So it was like, and you could just, like, oh my God, he's like, I don't know what to do tonight. And then he's like, yeah, come on over. It was wonderful. Like I was the best friend that I had, really. And in those years. And we had a lot of fun too, and all the stories, and He was always at the computer and writing those letters. And it was like midnight and it was still like, oh, you know, I'm writing a letter to the FDA now. And it was just like, wow, this man. And then when I wanted to say something, I have a big mouth and nobody ever wants to hear what I have to say, you know. But he would say, you're so spit and vinegar today. And I would just like, blah, 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 this and that. And he would just let me go. And it was amazing. I miss him already so much. And especially, I mean, I did see him only a month ago, or like something like that. And it was wonderful to see him, but yeah, I'm sorry I didn't see him one more time, but thank you. But there's so many other little things, but this is what I can come up with.
There's actually somebody here who might be willing to talk. You know, there's a person who introduced me to Howard Watson. Well, man,
He's sitting here.
no. Okay.
If people don't want to talk, don't think.
I don't know. But who else? Who else?
I used to run the 8th Street Shul on State Street. We would see many years, and Bob Sisko, he used to come to us from time to time, and it was very helpful. Plus, I had like a medical lab distribution for people from the synagogue, before the synagogue days, and Bob was always very helpful in providing our organization medical lab. And I remember when the first distribution started by Dana Beal at Wetlands.
Yeah.
At Wetlands, they had they started the first dispensary medical lab. Then later on, moved over to the university on the university is on the corner of
University of the Streets?
Yeah, University of the Streets.
Oh, well, where is he? He's just, where did Kenny go?
Kenny, yeah, Kenny ran the distribution.
Kenny was here a minute ago.
And
Is he in back
Bob was
now?
always helpful with Dana making the parade, the smoking on Washington Square Park. It's just amazing that wherever he was, he lit up the whole place. Everybody felt so comfortable with him. Talked their whole heart out because he was there for them. Because he was so compassionate, so had kindness. Just amazing. And even on the outsides, he showed himself as a warrior. Inside, he was a sweet teddy bear. I would just like to read a few words from books. I left the book right here. I'm sorry, I'm still there. Only book from the National Wrestler. The Ukraine festival going on in Uman every year. There's about 50,000 people that gather there, dancing and singing in the streets for 2-3 days straight. It's just amazing. Now, world is full of strife. There are wars between the great world powers. There are conflicts between different localities. There are feuds among families. There is discord between neighbors. There is friction within households between man and wife, between parents and children. Life is short. People die every day. The day that is past will never return. Death comes closer every day. And people still fight and never once remember their goal in life. All strife is identical. The friction within a family is the counterpart of the wars between nations. Each person is a house in a household is the counterpart of the world power. Their quarrels are the wars between those powers. The traits of each nation are also reflected in these regions. Some nations are known for anger, others for bloodthirstiness. Of course, the great America, where everyone is known for its benevolence. Each one has its particular trait. The counterparts of these traits are found in each household. You may wish to live in peace. You have no desire for strife. Still, you are forced into disputes and conflict. Nations are the same. A nation may desire peace and make many concessions to achieve it. But no matter how much it tries, it remains neutral. It's still be caught up in war. Two opposing sides can demand its allegiance until it is drawn to war against its will. The same is true in a household. Man is a miniature world. His essence contains the world and everything in it. Everything in the world is each person. Man and his family contain the nations of the world, including all their battles. Man living alone can become insane. Within him are all the warring nations. His personality is that of the victorious nation. Each time a different nation is victorious, he must change completely. This can drive him insane. He is alone and cannot express the war within him. But when one lives with others, these battles are expressed toward his family and friends. There may be strife in the household of a tzaddik, a righteous person. And he said Sisko truly was a tzaddik, a very upright, honest, good person. This too is a war between nations. It is also the war between the 12 tribes, such as between Ephraim and Yehuda. They were divided up. 10 tribes went into exile and they wandered all over the world. So when the Messiah comes, all wars will be abolished. The world will have eternal peace, as it is written. They will neither hurt nor destroy.
Yeah, people assume one.
Most things that people fear,
let me see if we can do it.
Cannot harm them at all. The only one a person can think. The only time a person can think clearly is when he is dead. When he's lying on the ground with his feet to the door, everything becomes clear to him. He will finally see the truth. And then he will realize that all his fear and apprehension was mere foolishness. All his concerns were for nothing. For what can a mere mortal do to him? No one rules over anyone. Everyone has a direct connection to the one who gives him life. The same is true of his desires and temptations. Lying here dead, he will realize that he wasted his days in vain. He will know that his most overwhelming desires were mere foolishness and silliness. Who really forced him? No one can force someone else. People do what they choose. It may make a deep impression on us, other people, but really we're making the choice to follow whatever influence is out there. But a person must die before he fully understands these things. He was also, at that point, he's dead, his consciousness can understand a higher consciousness, beyond intellect. So life goes on. It's just that he's not parked in a body anymore. But his soul is always there. It's not physical, so it can't be destroyed. So it lives on and on, from one level to the next. And amazingly, Bob Sisko and Howard Lotsow and the third brother, Dana Beale, were fighting for Ibogaine, because Ibogaine interrupts all addictions. The person becomes free from all addictions. There's no coffee, there's no cigarette, there's no chocolate, there's no opiates, just what's life itself. Life itself is so precious. We're like plugged in like the light bulb. We're getting the light every moment, the source of life. But it's so hidden, it's a hidden light, so we don't notice it. Unless we make an effort and we discover ourselves, who we really are. And the person is more than what he thinks he is.
Yeah. Well, I gotta let him finish.
It's so vast, it's just amazing. Sisko brought out those hidden abilities.
I think he's getting to a point.
He became aware and developed himself much more in his later years than earlier on. It's just amazing how he strived from level to level as he got older. And he felt one with everybody because everybody felt one with him when he came around. Bob just at home, and he was there for them. He had such a loving heart. And that continues and that goes on. It never stops. The good thing always remains. Never gets lost. It's not a physical aspect, more than physical. The real person is more than its physicalness. It's a soul in a body with directionless. Imagine if the wolves would start talking to us. We would go out of our minds. We are just as physical. Stones, walls. And so we need to realize that we can think big and become big. And see, Howard Lotsow in the 60s was roaming around the village and he was lost. And we found Bob Sisko, and Sisko and him in the rear. Okay. So as life goes on, I wish you all well, and let us learn from Bob Sisko all the time, wherever we are.
Want to talk? Yeah.
Hey,
Margot is going to talk, and then we're going to try to put some people on who are online, and they'll be speaking. We'll jack them in here, and they'll be speaking from the wall.
I first met Sisko at least 30 years after I heard about it. Some of my best friends' family, Marcel and Ed and Harmony Grimes, people knew Sisko, and I would hear stories about Sisko. And I had gone to college in New York, but I hadn't been back until like 2007 to really live here. And he welcomed us with open arms. He was like a mensch. I can't even believe the level of hospitality. And he had this gorgeous, the apartment on Essex Street with the views of the bridges and, you know, an amazing place to display the art. And he had such a he had a Rothko, and he had a number of pieces that I was really familiar with. And he would just love to talk about that in politics. And he played great music and he wrote the really nice joints. And he even let us come with our dog once. We stayed there one night because it was like an unexpected visit to town. And he accepted jazz. He was just a mensch and a wonderful person. And I also remember how much he was devoted to and very loving for his son Noah and for his daughter Hannah. They were such an important part of his life, and I just have great memories of our.
Okay, we're gonna see if this works now. Can you? Hello?
Yeah, hi Dana.
Hello, Lakshmi.
Hello.
Just talk like normal people. That's a technical advisor. Hi. Is Jeremy still there?
Who's talking?
Yeah, I'm still here.
How about Jeffrey?
Who
Jeff
wants?
wants to say something. Jeff
Who-
is,
Yeah, okay. Let's put him up somehow. Can you arrange for him to be up? Right now, the person we see is Jeremy.
Oh, I
Jeff-
see. Yeah,
Jeff
yeah.
is there.
I'll spotlight him. Hold on. So Jeff, can you unmute? Okay. And then spotlight. Okay, here goes.
Wow. That's me. I'm talking, Lux?
You are.
Okay, so it's really brings back some amazing memories of 20 years ago when most of us who are here today have been around, are the original Iboganauts, thanks to Howard and Dana and people like Bob. And, 20 years ago, there was maybe 20 of us who cared enough about the substance to meet in Dana's basement and have a conference. And, but I keep thinking that Bob was so far ahead of his time. The man was really just 20 years ahead of the time with his ideas. I remember when Bob approached me, before anybody heard the phrase of microdosing, Bob says, Jeff, I'm gonna put a little bit of Ibogaine and some vitamins and sell them in Canada. And I'm like, Bob, you're crazy. What are you talking about? I'm gonna put Ibogaine and a vitamin and sell in Canada. And he actually did this, I think Bob is, tripping somewhere now, laughing his ass off with Howard and wherever we go after we pass. And I'm certainly going to miss him. And it saddens me that, Ibogaine is so popular and getting so much credence now. And we have only 11 people at this memorial for the real founders and crusaders who brought Ibogaine to the world and taught us all that this is a miracle plant, not only for addictions, but now we're seeing for so many other things to cure mental illness, traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's, etc. So Bob, wherever you are, I'll see you again someday, I'm sure. Hopefully not sooner than later, but rest in peace, brother.
Does anybody else from there wanna go on now? Anybody else want to talk from Zoom world? Because otherwise we'll put up another person. I mean, I did have you guys wait a long time. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, 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 we can hear you.
Okay, do you want to talk, Claire?
Sure.
Claire is the head of the Global Ibogaine Therapy Alliance.
I'm not the head. I just have my own head.
Right, she's not the head.
Hi, Norma. Hi, Boaz. Hi, Joni. Hi, Noah. I really, really wish I could be there and hug you guys and really, really, this is tough, I think, for a lot of people. You know, we're all who knew Bob closely are mourning, and but he would want us to be laughing and he would want us to be singing, like Noah said, and joking. And it's really great to hear the laughter there. I knew Bob for many, many years. I always stayed at his loft when I went to New York City if I wasn't staying with Norma. And we sang and we drove up to Canada together. And we had one funny time when we were crossing the border and the border guard said to us, and he's got IBO Plus as his license plate. And the border guard said, "So what is the nature of your business?" And Sisko says, "Phytochemicals." And I think it just boggled the guy's mind, you know, because if I heard anything chemicals and I were a border guard, I would, you know, send him to secondary, and he just let him slide right on through. And that's the kind of person Bob was. He could charm his way, he had a twinkle in his eye always. And he really cared so deeply about having safe and effective treatments. And he worked so hard. His office was so full of so much paraphernalia that pertained to this movement. He shared so many amazing stories with me, and I wish that I could share them all with you, but I don't have the capacity that Bob did to share the stories that he did. He wanted to do a presentation in Portugal called Dope Law, Folklore. And I always thought that was so beautiful, you know, that he had the whole history, not just of Ibogaine, but when he started iCash and, you know, was one of the pioneers of harm reduction and the rights for all human beings to have access to do whatever they want to do with their own bodies. And he lives in me, and I'm getting a little choked up right now. So I think it's time for me to stop, but I just really feel honored to be included, and I miss Bob, and but he lives on. I have, you know, we all have our own little mementos, and yeah, I don't really have much more to say. I'm sorry.
Is there anybody else in Zoom land that wants to talk now? Claire?
Is there anybody? Oh, probably Jeremy has some great stories.
It's quite late here, but I'll just read out something that Alvaro wrote, because I think Alvaro's now gone to bed. So Alvaro wrote, I wanted to share some words of gratitude. I'm so very grateful to Bob for helping me through the beginning of my journey with Ibogaine. He helped me understand the corporate world of Ibogaine, how to go about setting up a clinical trial, all the intricacies of getting all our ducks in a row, as he called them, who to watch and who not to watch. We had many conversations. He was very kind, patient, supportive, and incredibly inspiring. Despite the challenges of dealing with Ibogaine at this high level, we were unfortunately too financially embarrassed to follow through, but we gave it a damn good try. His support was invaluable. I was very lucky to have been able to spend time with him at the Porto Ibogaine conference. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. See you on the other side.
Well, unless there's somebody else there who, you know, wants to talk out of the Zoom, I'm going to go back to live people. Is that all right? Hello. We're going to go back to live people. Okay. Hold your info.
I never had all the adventures you guys had with Bob Sisko, but I loved him dearly, and I knew him since the early 80s when I met him first. And I have to say, the most interesting thing was his work with Gary McGivern. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, here,
This tells you a lot about Bob Sisko. Gary McGivern was like a guy who, you know, had a messed up life, wound up in prison, and happened to be in a car transporting another prisoner when the other prisoner decided to make a breakout and shot and killed a cop. And of course, McGivern, it had nothing to do with it, and tried to save the cop, and he stayed there and told everybody what happened. But of course, as they didn't get the guy who got away, they blamed him for it, and he got a tremendous sentence. And for years, Sisko worked to get this guy. Like, most people would have just, because the guy he wasn't like the sweetest person who ever lived. He was a nice guy, actually, McGivern, but he did criminal things, I guess, quote unquote, and he was sort of screwed up and probably wound up in jail for doing things he shouldn't have been doing. But at the same time, he still gave all that energy and all that time and all that effort for years and years to get this guy out of jail. And that tells you something about the man. You know?
And he wrote the song.
Right. I don't know all the inside stories. I know you told me that, and I love that story because it really showed. I mean, you know.
Yeah, he got him out of prison.
He got him out of prison. And we live in a time when people give the time to let somebody get hit by a car keep on walking. And here you have a guy who, for somebody he didn't know, he had no connection with, out of his own pocket. And a man who didn't have a lot of resources. And I love the fact he was the first person I ever knew who privately owned a giant full-size Xerox machine. I never knew that somebody had that. Giant what? The giant Xerox machine in his living room. I got a giant one, a mass one that did like thousands of copies and stuff. He was a great paralegal. We didn't talk about that aspect. Like, he was really a great paralegal, a great legal mind. He got Gary McGivern out of jail, which was unbelievable. How many people involved even smell the air around a cop killing ever get out of jail? And he got this guy out of jail. And I have to give him credit. Somebody said earlier he had an amazing amount of ability to reach out and connect with people. And he did across all kinds of lines and barriers and stuff. I give him a great hand for that. I'd say if that was the only thing, I mean, all the things that happened, I'd say that made Bob Sisko a great man.
Tell us how many different kinds of jobs your father had.
Well, my father, he wore many hats. He worked on an Icelandic fishing boat. He worked in the Timna mines in Israel. For those of you who don't know, that's supposed to pay a lot. He had a joke about that, but I won't say it. He worked many jobs. When he was a young man, he was even a paper delivery person. And he really liked to travel, liked to do different jobs. And if he was here, he'd be very happy. He's here with us in spirit. But this church here, this Earth Church, is right around the corner from his old place. He worked on a fishing boat. He worked many different jobs, public relations, paralegal. He was involved for a little while in construction. I don't know he was that great at it, but if he was here today, he would certainly have a lot to say. He would thank everyone for coming here. My father and many others, Norma, Howard, especially Boaz over here, they were the freedom fighters for the Iboga, and they believed that the Guidi should be with us. And the people who took the Ibogaine, they were the initiates. And they were usually somebody, you know, everybody that takes that Ibogaine, they feel it forever. You know, it's with them forever. It's like a gift. And they put their freedom on the line. And even when my father went to Gabon, he was even putting his life on the line. There was an episode where they tried to make him miss his appointment with the president. They set him up with a beautiful woman, and they gave him some drugs. But my father was no stranger to drugs, so he knew the effects and quickly, you know, barricaded himself in his hotel room and tried to sleep it off as best as possible. So there was some, you know, espionage, and definitely he put his freedom on the line, and he really fought for what he believed in. And in some cases, he may have put his life on the line. And he would really appreciate everybody coming out here. He was lucky enough to meet my daughter I had a child recently with my wife. My father had traveled to the Dominican Republic with me because he was sick and he wanted to meet my daughter. Wasn't sure if he was going to meet her before he passed because he's been sick for quite some time, and all of his friends died of the same ailments pretty recently, almost in order. So kind of like the last of the few there. And he was lucky enough to meet the daughter, and then a couple hours later, he was just holding on by a thread for that, and he passed. He made me a promise that he was going to try to stay alive until my daughter was born. And I put my daughter, fresh out of the hospital, on the bed next to him. She was still in the car seat. And he woke up for a minute. He looked at her and said, "She's beautiful." Went back to sleep. So he did, you know, he did fulfill his promise. And I fulfilled my promise to him that he would be taken care of in the way out, the way that he wanted to, according to his particular beliefs. And he would thank everybody for coming here today. And I made up a poster of some pictures of him and stuff from some Ibogaine, which he was a huge proponent of, and he really believed in it. You know, it really is something of a miracle, whether you've taken it or not. Nobody can dispute that people can go and stop smoking cigarettes and stop drinking alcohol and stop doing a whole host of other things and get completely purified where they're ready to go to the gym and start eating salads. I mean, it's like a revolutionary thing. And they used to say it's like 10 years psychotherapy and one big pill. And may the weedy be with you. And that's what he would say if he was here. And he will be missed. He was a wonderful person, and he had that spirit of adventure that you couldn't kill his spirit. He might be gone, but his writings, I have brought some of his writings, The Vanishing World of Iboga, something he produced also called his Ibogography, which he described his life and times, and some other stuff where he wrote about things. And a lot of people put all their money into these projects. They work tirelessly and put sometimes their freedom in jeopardy to try to make this product that should be available, more available to people. And they believed it shouldn't just be available to people who had, you know, thousands of dollars it would take you to go fly to Mexico and get the treatment. They believe that other people should be able to get it, you know, through medical insurance and at a reasonable price. And one of the things that he did really love is that article that Max Cantor wrote. Max Cantor used to come over here to the basement apartment where we lived for many years, and he would interview my father doing research for his article in the Village Voice. And I became friendly with him, and he was a wonderful person. And my father really was saddened by his untimely death. So he thanks you for joining us here. And he was in a lot of pain. Unfortunately, he's not anymore. And we're all gathered here today to celebrate his extraordinary, historical, and unique life filled with action and adventure, because he was a Rolling Stone.
So Sisko had a wall where he put his best friends. Noah, do you know where this wall is now?
I have a good idea. I've been going through some of this stuff. I have some photographs over there. We pass it around, but we return it at one time. And his wall of the dead that he had grew larger and larger. And to a certain point, he couldn't even get any more pictures on there because he wasn't able to locate the pictures of the dead. But certainly, he had many, many friends and loved ones that many untimely passing. And he had a great reverence for the people who passed on and enjoyed them tremendously.
But Howard, some updates, but him and other people that are significant to him, because we're all getting older.
Yeah, he had the wall of death. Yes, that is true. People that he knew and loved. That is correct. He was very big on remembering people that made impacts on him and contributions to society and whatnot. He loved everybody. He loved all of you. And we thank you for coming here today.
And those postcards of Mexican, whatever, oh, thousands. I worked in Cisco's house helping him organize, helping file all the different patents, all the triages, and I did the same thing with Howard and Norma, because I met Cisco from Howard and Norma, because we were film school mischief makers in documentary film. So, but I got work out of both of them to organize papers, because look, this is back in the day where the computers had the floppy that you got to give it the brain. You know what I'm saying? So papers. So I made some change off of it. I also got to learn a lot and make some wonderful friends. And I got to go on trips. I got to go to Amsterdam where the Grand Poobah presented the overflow. Who was that guy? So this is the guy from Gabon who gave the Ibogaine plant in Amsterdam. Okay. Because I knew technology, so I could do that. Then I got to go to Panama because yo hablo español. So I got to be the media representative there because they were doing preclinical trials from the National Institute of Drug Abuse and NIDA with the Universidad de Panama over there. And we stayed in the hotel, of course, from where Noriega was hanging out a little bit before.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say, as far as Ibogaine and how sad it is that more people don't understand, I brought down junkies, crackheads, I brought down people to get treated. So they'd be getting their last dose in before we got on the plane, you know? I mean, banging through their legs, you know, whatever it is they've taken, the last they were taken before they got on the plane. And one time the stewardess comes over and goes, oh yeah, he's just very sleepy. But the thing is that right after they took it, and the eyes are closed, the vision is when your eyes are closed, that you hear the drums, right? I didn't do it, so I don't know if you hear the drums. And it's not a hallucinogenic that you want to abuse because when your eyes are open, you don't have it, and it's really interesting, I guess. What I hear, you know better. But right after that, within a few hours, the dudes are looking out the window in Panama at KFC, and they were hungry. Barbara, get me some Kentucky Fried Chicken. I'm like, what? You're not sick? You're not dope sick? What? Amazing. Problem is, it wasn't that much money for the program. So people like paid for things and different things, you know, without an after treatment, because it's the psychological cure for addiction, because you're like 6 months advanced in understanding what made you use, right? But if you're going right back on Thanksgiving to your family after you just had this wonderful successful treatment and you're going back to all the triggers, I mean, like, hold on. Because they really needed money for post. But it's just, it breaks my heart that all the work, all of it, how Sisko did that, everybody did that, Dana did, you know, that it, up every man, that it, you know, that it just, whatever it is right now, but it's sad. In any case, Sisko didn't let me smoke in his house. I'm not, well, he was smoking, chain smoking pot, right? So I would bash on his hypocrisy, and he would leave roaches around. His roaches were this big and fat like cigars. So I still have a roach in my house. Right? I'm not a pot smoker. I like hash, the old style hash where you got the big $20 and you got that black opiate and the green one, the old good stuff, you know. But I still have that roach, and that roach is from the late 70s. Wrapped up in my, so I'm gonna smoke it in the dark. I know what feelings are for you.
Thank you, thank you.
I wonder if I could say a few words.
Yeah. There's a kid I met when he was in college.
Bob, I wonder if I could say a few words from Seattle.
He loved going to the Dominican Republic, loved going all over the world. He's a real traveler and a businessman. He's been to more countries than I could count on my fingers and my toes. Been all over the world. He used to do business on 3 different continents.
Anyway, I'm going to introduce the next person who was kind of recruited into the Ibogaine project in 1993 when all this was happening. And subsequently somehow legalized psychedelic drugs in Colorado. Anyway, Noah, get up here. Noah Flagger.
Everybody, like, it's real experience. Sure, came up recently on Facebook. Picture of me and Sisko at the Memorial for Howard. I had actually, I'd stayed at this place.
Speak up.
I think I'd stayed at this place on Essex Street. The memorial was on Shabbat, if I recall correctly. Or maybe I'm scrambling that with the time I stayed by him for the cannabis parade. Anyway, yeah, 1993, May 1st, 1993, I met Dana at the 4-part demonstration that began on 125th Street in front of the office building, New York State office building, if I remember correctly. Some kind of protest against Wrangle. Anyway, that was a pivotal time in my life, and certainly it sent me down the path on which I've traveled for the last 30 years. And at that time, I guess I would, I thought of 3 forefathers, the 3 outposts, Howard, Sisko, Dan, were an example of what could be done, of what I could do. And there was a reason to live. There was a possibility that good would outweigh evil, and that the world could be a better place, and that we could live instead of burning ourselves to a crisp, just like Homo sapiens like to do. That there's a light ahead at the end of the tunnel, and there were these pioneers who were creating the pathway. I'm just really sad that I did this. I had the opportunity saying, yeah, I gotta go across town to visit. Because I used to visit him 3rd Street, Essex Street, and I went to go and see him. And it just never quite did it. And there's some kind of lesson to be learned from that. I'm not going to dwell on that because there's always somebody who just didn't see them. You know, you don't know when the end is going to come. But that's Sisko was actually definitely. And he was definitely a role model. When I saw what he was doing, I mean, Dana and Howard, they saw them doing this incomprehensible work, engaging the federal government. At the time, the only thing I thought you could do was burn down government buildings. That's like, what else are you going to do? But here, instead of taking a baseball bat to the system, these guys had like found the keyboard and they're like typing in, executing functions. So each of them have been a model for me in one way or another. Sisko in unique ways. Here was an example of somebody who was in the fight, in the movement, and he was Shomer Shabbat. He took off Friday night through Saturday night. He said, no, I can do that too. That's fascinating. Great. Just the example that he set of someone who was having the time of his life, like learning how to play the system. That was just, how much fun could you have? That was my perspective. That's what I saw from the outside. So the only other thing, I suppose, takeaway content is that I keep seeing giants leave. And I'm left here, and there's other people, there's where, some of us are left, and the giants keep leaving. And it's daunting. I mean, how does this next generation possibly keep up with or match what the generation before us did? They didn't have guides. They figured it out for themselves, and the rest of us, next generation down, are all beneficiaries. But so less able to do what they did then, in that we follow their example and they blaze the trail. I've said, there are stories that are told now, the stories that could be told, because there are many, many stories. There's only so much time, so many things to say in one memorial service, is that the stories need to be reported. The stories of the movement, how things happened, are going to be lost. And that's a big problem. The stories that have been told tonight and the stories that weren't told but need to be told need to be recorded. So in the same way that the staff of Overthrow created Blacklisted News, they Yippee book, Dana with others wrote the Ibogaine story, tell the story as a testament to the future. I guess my practical takeaway for tonight, on top of just expressing my great sorrow that I didn't go to see him, is that I hope we can, everybody here who has a story to tell, brings up their stories, maybe sketches out their stories until such time as we can find somebody who's somebody or somebody's who will tell the story, make the documentary, write the article, write the book. They're both being written now. Head's story of the one version of the psychedelic movement. The documentary Sunshine Makers on Tim Scully. So there are people who are telling the stories, but this movement that came out of the Lower East Side is still unknown. And while those of us who are still here, I hope we can do something to record these stories of how it happened. Because my hope is that there is a chance for species survival. There is a chance that Homo sapiens will not just destroy ourselves and everything on the planet. If that's the way things turn out, I expect the psychedelics will play a pivotal role. So the story, a big part of the story came from the Lower East Side, and here we are. This Lower East Side, this portal through which incomprehensible power and energy came into the world, manifested through this strange space, through the refugees who came here, or people who grew up here in the fertile ground for a movement to develop. It would be a tragedy if the story were not known, because I think the story in and of itself will be to the extent that that story stays true and continues on, it means that the mission has a chance to succeed, and the world can be the better place, the happy place in the future, not the unhappy dystopian future, but the happy future. It'll be because of the trajectory of the movement here, and those of us who are left are witnesses. We need to testify.
So I think Eric Swenson wants to speak from the Zoom. Can you hear me?
You gotta speak up.
Sorry, I think it's appropriate to follow that beautiful speech, considering I'm here recording this. recording the stories.
I can't do it.
For Sisko, Robert, Shimon, who's known by many names to me. But I'm not just here. I wasn't hired to be here. He changed my life in a lot of ways. I only met him about 12 years ago. We met at our mutual synagogue, the Chabad of Lower East Side. And the story of how we met is actually related to how he spent. I've witnessed so many stories of him trying to connect people and make connections to help other people, and in ways that really did change their lives. And the way I got close to him was he actually had a friend. We would see each other at synagogue, and he had a friend. I don't know, some of you may know him. His name was Zev Horowitz. He was a dancer. At the age of 50, he realized he was the best shaker anyone had ever seen. He shook his whole body like a bobblehead and span like a helicopter. And one day at synagogue, Sisko came to me. He said, "I have a friend. He wants to make a music video." And he took it upon himself to hire me to make a music video for his friend. And this process took over a year and a half. Not even kidding. He would come over. He would take off his shirt. He would hit a drumstick against the table and just start saying, shake it up. And I had to create this video from scratch. And it was such an interesting process. And ultimately, when this gentleman was in the hospital right before he passed away, it was by divine providence that a friend of mine had gotten in a car accident and ended up a friend of mine who had helped me make this video at one point ended up in the bed next to him. And even though this gentleman was in his 70s and my fast-paced music, MTV-style music video wasn't something he really felt was like appropriate at the time of making the video, on his deathbed, he literally was showing everyone in that hospital that video. That was his legacy. And Sisko created that legacy for him. He took it upon himself to say, this man needs to have his story told or a music video and it was because of his generosity and beautiful soul that existed for this gentleman. And then about a year later, when I needed a place to live, he approached me and said, I have a half floor of a building. Maybe you want to check it out. And for the last 11 years, I've lived in this loft space that Sisko gave to me. And about 4 or 5 years ago, he asked me to take over his half when he moved in with his son. And I'm sleeping in his bed right now. And it's really surreal to know that he's not here anymore. But I would say 40 to 50 people in the last 11 years, who started out as a 5-bedroom, now a 9-bedroom, have come through that loft and have been given homes because of Sisko, because of Robert Rand. He's changed my life. He's changed all of their lives. And when his daughter's school was affected significantly by Hurricane Sandy, he approached me and hired me to make a documentary about his daughter's school to raise money. I mean, this is the type of guy he was. He was just literally take it upon himself, take his own funds and say, I need to help someone in something, some entity, something he believed in. He went all out. And I saw that time and time again. And he really was like a father figure to me. I have a father who's in politics. I don't really have a strong connection to him. We have a lot of difficult history. But there are 2 times in my life I reached out to him to help me with something. One was a passport issue, because he had a connection to the passport office and I needed to utilize it. The other was when Sisko asked me to help with some type of Ibogaine bill that he truly believed in. And I just hearing what it was all about, I just couldn't help but ask my father and do what I can. And I know he was always grateful to me for that. And I'm grateful to him for a million reasons.
Is that David Weprin?
Yes, that's my
Oh,
father.
wow.
So it was because of
what, like the person we went to, Weprin was very well-intentioned. We went to the head of the Substance Abuse Committee and she said, I'm not going to legalize Ibogaine for you. But then 3 years later, we wrote a bill to legalize Ibogaine, which is stalled, but it worked.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know
Linda Rosenthal. Linda Rosenthal.
I'm glad to be able to help in any way. I'll never be able to do enough to help him or do anything for him the way he did for me. And I'm so grateful to be able to record this, like the gentleman who just spoke said, and I have this all recorded and I just know that God will look upon him with the unbelievable chesed and kindness he did for so many in his life. And his soul should have the highest elevation possible because he's just an incredible soul. And I know he is so grateful that everyone he touched should be affected in the way they were. And yeah.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Steve Marcus. And it was many, many years ago, I had dreadlocks to my waist. I'm an artist. I was living a very wild life. My father, blessed memory, had a heart attack and dropped dead on Rosh Hashanah. And I took upon myself to say Kaddish, which is a prayer that you say for your parents 3 times a day for 1 day, short of 11 months. And hadn't been in a synagogue probably since my bar mitzvah. I was, like Sisko, traveling around, doing my art, and it was a culture shock. And the people that are saying, prayers 3 times a day in synagogue are basically Orthodox, white shirt, black hat, sit, and I show up for Minkamar, which is the afternoon, evening prayer, and felt it's not just a few, 3 months into it, and always felt very out of place at home. It's a good way to say it. And one day at Mincha, this guy comes up to me, and he's got the yarmulke, he's got the kippah, he's got the tzitzit, the white shirt, the beard. I'm there look like I'm like the hair in the matzo ball soup or something. And he said, comes up to me and he says, "What's happening, man?" He's like, and I was like so taken back. Nobody really talked to me in such a casual way, and people just kind of didn't really pay much attention to me. I would say the Kaddish and just leave. And I felt very uncomfortable that this guy said this to me. So I kind of walked away. So he follows after me. And he's like, "You good? Everything cool, man?" And I said, I didn't know what to say. And I kind of, I've been around the block. And I looked at him, I said, "You making fun of me?" And because I thought that he was trying to, relate to me in like some kind of funny way. He said, "No, I used to look just like you." And I said, "What?" I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I used to have long hair. I used to be this guy." And he's told me all about himself. And he instantly made a very difficult moment in my life very comfortable. And he instantly, we became friends. And he really, during a very difficult period, I ended up seeing him every day, and for Minkamar. And since I also lived around the corner from him, used to end up going to hang out with him. And he was such a passionate, loving, kind person. He did tshuva, which was also an amazing thing to know that somebody made such a spiritual decision in his life, and really in a way he really gave me a big blessing by taking me and making me build that bridge in between like artistic kind of countercultural wild past into a new chapter of my life. And he's somebody that I always will always hold in just a very deep place, and I'm very grateful for the time that he gave me. And he also is just such a lovely person that everybody here knows. And it's like, what can you say about somebody who's so amazing and such a giving person? I met him at the Mesrit Shul, Rabbi Ackerman of blessed memory. And so I was over there at 6th Street, between First and A, and Rabbi Ackerman and Sisko. I ended up, they said to me, "Oh, you should lead the prayers." So meanwhile, I got this long hair and whatever, I showed up in a Harley Davidson t-shirt, and he said, no, you should lead. So I ended up, for the time that I was saying Kaddish, I would lead over there. That's where we met, over there at 6th Street. So anyway, this is
is the summer Chicago. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Sandy, he was on the ABC Day One, which Cisco, were he here, he would try to figure out how to have us play that. He considered that one to be one of his greatest accomplishments, getting that to be created. And Sandy Ackerman was a star of the show. You know, he was driving, I think he was driving deliveries of a butcher around on the show. He did it for cocaine. So there must be some other people who want to step up here and talk about Bob. Yeah, you should. Introduce yourself. Explain your connection.
I'm coming out of the shadows. My name is Charlie Knapp. I met Bob under very strange circumstances. I'm an attorney, and I was defending a federal forfeiture. The federal government, in its wisdom, was prosecuting this fellow who 30 years before, living on Martha's Vineyard, had a little boat, needed some money, and offloaded a couple of bales of marijuana twice from a mothership. And that was it. That was the early 70s. He went on with his life. In the late 80s, early 90s, the DEA finally busted the top guy who must have kept records even better than Bob, because they went all the way back to the early 70s. They arrested this guy, and they decided that he had a nice little house on Martha's Vineyard. He must have used drug money for it, so they moved to seize it, figuring no one could really stop them. I had left the U.S. Attorney's Office a couple of months before, and a friend of mine from that office, who was friends with the defendant, called me up and asked me if I would take this forfeiture case on a pro bono basis, which I was happy to do, especially once I found out the circumstances.
I'm on a Zoom memorial.
Charlie Adler was defending this guy, and he had this very enthusiastic.
No, it's for
He gave me his card, and it said Robert.
Avia's dad's best friend.
Now, of course, there's no such thing.
Yes, good. So squiggly.
But how could you not immediately like this guy? And I did. Fortunately, I was successful in defending the forfeiture. The government gave up. Then a year later, I went out with two other attorneys, and we set up our own shop.
No, I don't really know. I'm probably not gonna go. I don't like those kinds of things. I don't like going to those.
And it was for Bob. And I knew him as Bob. I knew he went by Sisko, but he was always Bob to me. And that case began my long association with Bob as his pro bono counsel on Ibogaine. Along the way, we had a couple of twists and turns where he told me that I had to save the shul, which was the Meserit shul, which was falling apart. We were able ultimately to get a development project so that the Meserit shul exists today.
Okay, stop. No.
Product of that search to save the shul. Along the way, we had to deal with a very interesting fellow who claimed that he was actually the rabbi of the shul and had sued the shul to be the rabbi, and I had to defend that case in front of a very cantankerous state court judge, Ira Gammerman, who I happen to have known for a long trial I had in front of him, and he was a no-nonsense guy. I knew that he needed to be quick, effective, don't bullshit him, because he really did not like that. The attorney who was representing the rabbi apparently had never been in front of Judge Gammerman, and Judge Gammerman made it pretty clear that he like this supposed rabbi or anything about him. And when Rabbi Ackerman testified, that was the end of the case. We had the legal argument that we were all prepared to make, and that Judge Ackerman, well, he may as well have been a judge too. But Justice Gammerman, at the conclusion of the testimony, said, well, in the usual way, I've reached my decision, but does anyone want to put in a memorandum of law? And he looked at me and said, Mr. Knapp, you don't have to put in anything. And the shul avoided more sewers. And so, but Bob, as everyone was saying, had all these enthusiasms. Right? He was the most genuine person I ever knew. We took a trip up to Halifax as part of Ibogaine research to deal with what I thought was Dalhousie University, but it's pronounced Dalhousie or something like that. And this was at the time where resources were scarce on Ibogaine, but we were hoping that the next level would happen. So we anticipated, because Bob was always anticipating when I used the oil. He was the visionary, and I was trying to run behind him to try to keep everything on the straight and narrow. And he decided that what needed to be done was to examine to see if you could take an Ibogaine plant and clone it. That way you would have consistency throughout. And this guy at Dalhousie said that they could do that. And so off we went. I was introduced at that point to a person who became very important, Darren. And we became friendly over time. And it turned out that the people up in Canada's reputation is they're all nice, welcoming people. But this guy was either exaggerating his credentials or exaggerating the science, because it turned out he was not the right guy to do that. The thing that I'll always remember about this Ibogaine adventure, which by the way is not over, it will continue because it's just too important to let go. But when I first met Bob, maybe it's because he still saw himself as paralegal to the bar, that everything seemed to be, well, let's sue him. Let's sue them. Let's sue this person. And, you know, he was sued. He had the famous lawsuit brought by Deborah Mass. We had to go down to Florida to sort that out. I was able to get a resolution. The way it goes. But it started out with a lot of lawsuits. Even though I'm a litigator, there comes a time where lawsuits are really distracting. And the only thing I credit myself for over a couple of years was getting Bob to see that going to court slows things down, wastes money, and prevents you from getting to where you are. And over time, the lawsuits dropped off. We had lawsuits with Dr. Alper, we had everybody. Then it went down to pretty much nothing. And then Bob had what I thought was his fundamentally great insight, where he just decided that he was going to make sure that the patients would have the best, the most pure Ibogaine possible. And he created out of nothing what turned out to be the Malady Pharmaceuticals production of Ibogaine. He was able to get the Belgian patents, and that was almost a litigation because they took the money and gave him half of what they promised, but we worked that out. Then everything started to look good. Then, of course, I never knew where Bob got his money from. I never really asked, but one thing I do remember was in trying to expand everything, Bob had found out that in the 1950s, I think it was France or Switzerland, they had a small pill that would perk you up.
Lamborghini.
Yeah, and it was used mostly by mountain climbers and volcanologists because when they went way up in the mountain, they'd be short of breath and all that, and they took this pill. Now, obviously, there's not a great market. Mountaineers not gonna pay the bill, so that went by the wayside. But when he came across that, he then thought, well, we have all these horrible 5-hour drinks, all the taurine and all this other business. How about if I took a microdose of Ibogaine, tossed in some random vitamins, and marketed as, a natural supplement? I had no idea, but it sounded good. And they went to Canada. That became Ibo Plus. As Dana mentioned, it then became a problem with Health Canada. They did go nuts when it started to get publicized. So of course, just when you're going to succeed, you're.
I never could understand why, when he showed them the stuff about Parkinson's, he didn't prevail anyway.
Well, so Parkinson's was the next thing, but what happened in Canada was there was this one person at Health Canada in Vancouver. I forget her name.
No, she was in Quebec.
Well, okay, yeah.
And
But she
her name
had
was-
it in. Well, it doesn't matter what her name is. There's a Yiddish expression. But she was the one who, just as Bob decided we're going to do this, she single-handedly decided, no, you're not. And then there was as I guess you would call it, a quick retreat from Canada. The Parkinson's came up. Bob had come across some random PhD article where the guy hypothesized that dopamine, which of course is key in Parkinson's, was one of the key chemicals that would be expressed from Ibogaine. And so he linked it to Parkinson's. My father at the time was suffering from Parkinson's, so I was very interested in that. And we were able to get some funding for Columbia University to investigate this particular property. It took Columbia University a year, more or less, dealing with the DEA just to get the permit. And I remember talking with the researcher, and one of the things the DEA wanted to know was what type of screws they were going to be using to bolt down the safe where the Ibogaine was going to be kept, because of course it's a Schedule I narcotic. All this garbage. I'm an alumnus of Columbia, so maybe I'm biased, but if you can't trust Columbia University medical researchers, who can you trust? And maybe that's a rhetorical question. But eventually they were able to start the research. And what they found, to their amazement, was that Ibogaine expressed not only over 6 times the dopamine that would be expected in these specially designed lab mice, but that it lasted well beyond. I mean, it was still up there for the time period that they'd set in the research. And the way we interpreted, well, the way I interpreted it was that, might be the kind of layman's explanation.
No, it's a nerve growth factor.
Yeah.
It's a nerve growth factor.
Yeah.
It causes the dopamine neurons to refresh.
Yes. And so this is further proof that I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. But the point of the whole story is that meeting Bob back in 1990, and I didn't know anything about him other than he was this really interesting guy whose heart was always in the right place. He was always helping. And in my profession, when you come across someone like that, you want to get to know them better, because quite frankly, you don't meet many people like that,
even outside the law, I will speculate that people like Bob are 1 in a billion. And I will always be grateful for this association. It was so random, but it was so important. And sometimes random is what life looks like. But when you look back on it, it might just be there was a reason for it. So, you know, whatever way the Ibogaine research goes, whatever twists and turns it takes, I'll be interested. Thank you, Bob.
I think there's some other people here who know Bob Sisko, who haven't talked yet.
Okay, false advertising, because I really knew Howard and Norma really well. And then I got to know Sisko last like that. So it was 1967, maybe 60, yeah, I don't know, 69, who knows? You know, I lived through it, so I can't remember exactly. The streets were full of music. Charlie Mingus would walk around. Ginsberg and Orlovsky lived right here on 5th and C. Over here was Slug Saloon, where Lee Morgan got shot. Hank Mobley was down here. C. Sharp, Giuseppe Logan, all these great jazz musicians. Rashid Ali, Coltrane's band moved in with us. So this is what it was like down here. So I moved in. We lost our place, Tony and I, and we moved in to live with Evelyn Blakey, Art Blakey's daughter. And Norma comes in, and we're filling up the place. So who was there? Wynton Kelly was hanging out with Evelyn. He had been Steiner Washington's piano player. So music everywhere, all over the place. Norma gets a letter. She gets a letter from her husband, who's in India. He's gone through Nepal. Come on up. Got a letter saying he had discovered something that changed the world. You know, you hear this thing. Another one thinks it was real. He had discovered something that would change the world. What I remember, so I said, this is mostly about Howard and Norma, but we'll get to this in a minute. We'll get there. What I remember about Howard that really inspired me, touched me, is that he took on methadone rights. We were not allowed to be within 2 weeks of the 2 blocks of the clinic. Shake your medicine, get the hell out. We had no constitutional rights. They treated us like we were, you know, like we were dogs. Oh, that's not right. This country, we have to give people their rights. Methadone patients have rights. They can't be kicked out of the neighborhood. And remember, I wanted to do something at the Riviera, which is now a Starbucks. So fast forward. So Tony died, Howard died. I got to meet Sisko, beautiful man. And I didn't see him again until this spring. It was cold. There was ice on the ground. I remember. It must have been what, March, April. She brought me to Sisko's house, and Sisko was like, I don't know, 110 pounds. He was not eating. He lit up. He brightened up and laughing and cracking jokes and asking for weed. And I broke his ribs, so I had to lay down. So I lay down next to him, and he said, I haven't had a woman in this bed for so long. That's your servant. That's my Sisko story. Beautiful man. Blessed child.
Who else wishes to come up here and talk?
12 messages.
What? No, that's the Zoom, that message has been there. Okay.
I don't really have the depth of the experiences that everyone here has followed, but I did have good experiences with him. We started a newspaper in Lower East Side called The Shadow back in '89. And we got a call from a woman, and some of you guys like her, some of you guys didn't like her, named Linda Twig. And I never knew who she was. She was staying at the Chelsea Hotel at the time. And she became a Shadow fan. She just ran into the Shadow fan, and she helped us, everybody I met at the AI, WBAI, the radio station, including Bob Fass. I already knew Paul at the AI, to the Yippies. But, and Paul also was writing for the very first Shadow, since the Shadow first came out. And she kept on talking about this guy, Sisko. Every time we would have a conversation, Sisko. Who's Sisko? I didn't know his first name was Sisko. I'm thinking like the Cisco kid, CISCO. Some guy with his first name was Sisko. And she was always talking like highly of him. And so I can't remember all the circumstances, but I used to come to his place a lot on East 3rd Street. And every time he would give us like stuff we could use as Shadow story-wise. You have the Gary McGivern case. He made these little cassettes, a whole shitload of cassettes. He gave us a pile. He wanted to sell his cassettes in the Anarchist bookstore we started on 7th Street, like a short-lived store called A Central between B and C, across from 7th Street spot. Then he started singing a song about Gary McGivern. And I don't remember exactly how it went. It was like, we get this song. Like, sing with the Irish twang. And I'm like, it's really like, I'm like just taking over the room. And I'm like, he's so much passion. And like, so every time I saw him, there was one big smile, one big happy guy, tons of positive energy. Just, and I really regret, like the other guy who spoke a little while ago, like not seeing him for many years. And, because we all go in different paths, like there's a time where all interacting like regularly and then we all go in different directions. Maybe 10, 20 years go by, you connect again, maybe separate again. Maybe see each other every 20, 30 years as if you saw each other just the other day. So it's like there is time, but there's no time. And you're apart, you're together, you're connected with your family. And I feel really guilty that I haven't been in touch with you for a very long time. And seeing the post on Facebook, I was really shocked because, well, also kind of ashamed because I really should have stayed more in touch with him. But for this really short clip from the late 80s to like the mid 90s or early 90s, we're always hanging out, always connecting. Whether I saw him on the street, whether I saw him in his apartment, always happy, always vibrant. And a lot of you guys speaking pretty much just expressed this. He just had this positive energy. You light up the whole room. And very passionate, very caring about others, always trying to turn people on, whether it was herb or whether it was just a political thing or an idea or a plan or a scheme or a, infectious enthusiasm, I would call it, and just really spread that. And all of you guys talking today kind of indicate to me that he got into each one of us and we all have something in us from connecting with him. So there are no accidents, I mean, we're all meant to connect with each other, whether for a second of interaction and then maybe never again, or for a long time, and we maybe never split up, but we're all connected, however long or short. And it's just a magical trip this little life for us, got like a couple of split seconds above the ground. And just got to appreciate everyone we interact with, every positive interaction we have. And I really am just honored that I knew Bob, even that short time. It was horrible that I did like stay in touch with him over the years. But that little short time with him was really magical.
Let me see here.
Well, hey, listen, we could do reference to the invitation. We could do the mourners prayer. I could be an equal.
Let's wait till the end to do.
Yeah, I know. Not right now.
But
Anybody else?
Ramel,
Yeah, Ramel,
you're next.
You've been drafted.
You're next to speak.
You've been drafted. You've been drafted.
People are sharing their memories at Cisco, and you arrived in the nick of time.
Yeah. You know, I just found out, Dana called me, and you all fans and lovers of Dana sometimes don't respond to his calls. Because we kind of know, and with this one, I called him back. So Bobby died. I sat for a moment. You know, the usual kind of flooding of memories. We don't get this opportunity but one time. I mean, I don't know if I'll get another opportunity, but this precious human life, being able to connect with people and to do this kind of work, it's taxing on your soul and your spirit. Love helps to connect it. And Bob was one of those people that I got that love connection. Good gracious. I started thinking about times in Amsterdam, Dr. Bastien. Wow, it's always ever present. And all these places, because of Ibogaine, because of the advocacy, because of the concern of those people that we care about, that are marginalized, that are stigmatized, that are thrown away. We do this work, we continue to do it. And Bob just represents the authentic way. I used to tease him about kind of thing together. I love Bob when he spoke Yiddish. And most of the stuff I did not understand, but if Yiddish is like black folk and other indigenous people, we talk with your hands and the invocation, the ups and downs of the volume of the voice, and the music. Sometimes that look was like, crazy. Or that look would be, I don't have to be that with you on that. You just made something. So thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. But what an honor it's been. And as I'm looking around and I see us, we're older folks. Folks of us. You know, I mean, chief, I was born in the era of Jim Crow. And if you were born before 1965, you were too. So this energy that we bring forth and continue, let's think about 7 generations moving forward. What do we want to leave 7 generations ahead? We want to leave what Bob did. We want to leave what we are doing. But please, be gentle with yourself as you care for yourself so that you can care for others. And I think that's really my biggest takeaway. Our friend, my friend, Bob Sisko. Thank you.
Well, I know the person that is least likely, looks the least likely to speak, actually has something to say, right? So who are you? Come up and say it.
I don't know how to thank Bob for sharing his archive while we were trying to figure out what my role could be between Norma and Bob's work and Dr. Joseph Gross's work. Where there were a lot of communication prior to my arrival, although I'm a pharmacognosist, so I thought I could kind of get ready for policy at one point for Ibogaine. They'd be terrified that it's ever going to be challenging. It is still challenging in the States. And it's been underground for so long that we've carried so much burden of it being underground. We're not getting to the type of people that should be getting it. So, I know Bob through his archive. He's worked for almost 20 years. I went through every piece of document and all sorts that were part of his work every time. And I try to organize them, send a lot of stuff. And thanks to Boaz pushing me into working with him and getting the archive going. I feel so privileged to have done that. I guess last year, when I saw him last, he said he got over cancer. I'm so excited when I saw you with Norma, and I almost jumping to joy. You really got over cancer. And so we're talking about going down to Brazil to see Bruno and work with ptsd Brazil. So much of formulation that, Dr. Gross was sort of my mentor for many years. He sort of pulled and tugged with me to work with Ibogaine over like 6 years, but I kind of resisted because I know I could change the policy in malaria, but Ibogaine is like a whole different animal. You had to get it done in the States. Getting it done the rest of the world with WHO is easier than doing something in FDA. So my struggle with Dr. Gross trying to pull me into Ibogaine was always a fight. I don't think they're ready yet. I don't know how to go about this. How do we get a handle on this? Then I realized the kind of the distribution of the naltrexone and buprenorphine that is getting out to certain populations, and then the work that was needed in understanding how we could handle the arrhythmia. I thought it was, we've done a lot of work towards it in the last couple of years, and I think we're getting ready. In fact, I'm sort of trying to follow in Bob's guidance, and of course, manufacturing shut down in India and not having anybody having access to proper GMP product at the moment is disgraceful. Why FDA would. So when I heard then I was going to try to do more of the Ibogaine manufacturing in India, I immediately thought, oh no, not another shutdown, and then another company goes down. I thought we really need to take the bull by the horn in the States. I mean, I tried a bit in UK, and then Deborah Nash stepped in. I've met with the attorneys that represented Deborah Nash during the arduous years that Howard and Bob went through, and they, they keep saying, well, there's nothing really intellectually intellectual property using more ibogaine can be a product out there with the 30 steps that you need to go through to manufacture it. I said, yes, and so I've been struggling with the people who invested in Deborah for past about 2 months, complaining the hell out, saying what Deborah did was to push back what 40 years effort that went on to, to 30-year delay, what could have been approved when it was approved in NIDA. And so looking back, I just, I'm still hammering them. I'd like them to step up to what they did and their responsibility in retarding the progress. I told them straight out, and particularly when I found out Bob had passed away, I was I got very angry with them more, and I'm still, pushing and pulling with them. They are sort of on the board of the nonprofit organization, the Knowledge Recovery Foundation, where I'm trying to set up the archive now. We put a lot of stuff on the iCloud, and I was trying to set up a clinical management and budgeting software onto it and work with Bruno, but Bruno didn't want to work on that level yet. He's not ready. I think what hydrochloride, ibogaine hydrochloride brings to the surface is that, yes, it's not patentable. However, it's there as a great medicine. Without the IP protection, you are not going to raise the money, right? People are not going to give that funding needed to go forward. So I've been talking to NIDA at Columbia University. They have an OUD department, and I'm trying to convince them to help us raise money for the program. So it's just, gentle, but it's, it's kind of push and pull. I think from my personal experience with changing the policy, I worked on natural products like the shade laws and botanical drugs and malaria. Everybody said, we don't need malaria drugs, because we don't really have it here. But when we changed that policy, we went straight to WHO. I was very lucky. The Korean, Secretary General came in second day. And what happened is it's not change the policy. WHO just simply took it by the horn and said, okay, we're going to try to guide the manufacturing of this product and get it out as a pre-qualified agents, manufacturers, producers, to get the product out there first for $1. And for me, when I talk to people who represent Deborah Nash and their lawyers and their financial team that I have been crashing up against, I feel that there is a certain amount of possibility to bring the market in a low price, make it let everybody manufacture it to the GMP and get it to people. And nobody likes this concept. I never made any money out of doing malaria, but we did have a formulation in DMF. So coming from an extreme sort of more, I guess, open IP, open and sharing the knowledge and the experience, I think it's one solution. So I still go through a lot of the, Bob's archive, except for all the legal stuff that's still in Bob's. And I want to say thank you that I have an opportunity with this big archive that maybe I can kind of find the right place somewhere down the line working with. And I'm so sorry. I wanted to ask you so many questions, And, we'll carry forward. Thank you.
you know, eventually I'm gonna get up here and try to wrap things up. But, you know, there may be somebody here who really wants to like share a memory of Bob that hasn't spoken yet. I don't know who you are unless you like put your finger up or something. So.
Nobody probably recognizes me.
Speak up.
Aaron doesn't recognize me, Dana doesn't recognize me. I'm Billy Barabin. My mom was Gail Barabin.
Oh, Billy!
So my mom, I can say that without hesitation, anybody here who knows us for the last 50 years knows that Sisko loved my mom more than any woman in the world. We're stuck on her, we're hooked on her, and through all their many ins and outs, it was my mom who was always in Sisko's head. And I've known Sisko since I'm, that big, and Noah's always been a brother like me. I remember when I first met Noah. The first time I remember is Sisko said to me, I was maybe 10, 11, and we lived downtown, and I was already running around these streets in Lower East Side, and I was already beginning my career as an asshole. And,
Getting into this.
yes, and Sisko said, my son's coming down from Woodstock, and make sure he's okay. And I remember we went out in my neighborhood, and he had this fisherman's jacket on. And he started pulling joints out of his pocket. He was 8 or 9 years old at that, but literally getting 9 years old at that. And yeah, and he was, and whatever. Everybody loved him downtown, and so my relationship with Sisko proceeded from that. He was always a big part of my life, even after my mother passed. My mom passed when I was 20 years old, so. In 1990, she passed. Regrettably, introduced to somebody through Sisko. But anyway, all that being said, Sisko was a huge part of my life. His son has been a huge part of my life. These guys sitting up here, I've known since I'm in diapers. I carried suitcases to this guy's shop on 3rd Street. I've watched my mom go to bail this guy out from hitting people in the face with pies. And he was always there. He was always around. Always had a laugh, that crazy laugh with a joint in his mouth. And it was a raspy laugh. And he had it through my, bad addiction and stuff that went on through my life. Sisko also had his stuff and his demons, which he used to share with me a lot. And I remember one time I was maybe 18 or 19 years old, and we were up in the loft, and I came in from my room, and Sisko he gave me this thing. He said, you better take this and go downstairs because your mom's in the kitchen. And it was a bunch of drug paraphernalia that I had left on the thing, but I was missing something. And I went back to him a couple days later. I said, Sisko, I'm missing something from that package you gave me. So, yeah, we'll have to use that. And I'll never forget that because he always talked to me on my level. And I always appreciate that about him. I was able to talk to him. We went to Israel, just a quick Sisko story. No, it wasn't that, but there's another one like that. We went to Israel. I was 14, Noah was 12. And my mom and Sisko. And Sisko really wanted to get him bar mitzvah at the temple in the mountain, and we did. He did. I was there. It was just 4 of us standing at that table, and we're standing at a rock inside the cave. We went down into the temple and we did that, and it was an incredible moment. And I remember that, and we got in this little Jeep we had rented and went down to Eilat. We were going down to Egypt, and we stopped because he wanted to go in the salt mines that he had worked at 30 years before. In his 20s, he had worked at some salt mines down there in the desert. My mom and him went out. They, took whatever recreational stuff they were taking at the time, and they went out in the desert for a while, left us in the Jeep. And anybody who knows my mom, I saw her travel. For anybody who knows my mom, I was driving at 10. She told me to drive at 10, literally driving at 10. So that by the time I was 12, I could drive my mom up to Port Jervis, New York, where her mother lived, my grandmother, because she didn't want to drive. She just didn't want to drive. She was either too tired or too hungover, or whatever the case was. And so I was
12 years old and you're
driving on the New York State Thruway, on Florida 17 to Port Jervis, New York.
Regarding your mom, I could believe it.
Yes. So anybody here who remembers my mom, there's a few of you here.
She was cool.
She was cool as shit. And Sisko was too, and they were a team together. They left us in the Jeep, and we went driving around the desert. I was 14, he was 12. And we get off the road, and we hit some sand dunes. Out of nowhere, there was this huge half track with machine guns and a couple of Israeli soldiers. And they plowed right on us. We couldn't move, and they had their guns literally on us. And me and, Noah were like 14 years old. So we're like, what the fuck? We didn't, we're Americans. And the one guy came out, he looked at us, and he just said, whatever he said. I didn't know Hebrew then. Now now I know it. And he said, let him go. And he said, get the hell out of here. And we went, and we couldn't find them. We couldn't find them for hours. They were out there tripping on whatever they were tripping on. And we hung out in the car, and we had wound up having a good time. But Noah and I wound up actually taking their pharmaceuticals, and we wound up in the Mediterranean Ocean at 2 in the morning in Tel Aviv, and they went looking for us. So they couldn't find us. So we got them back that night, or maybe a couple nights later, and we wound up in the ocean for hours just tripping ourselves. And we got them back that night. They really went looking for us. They couldn't find us. But Sisko was always there. Really huge part of my life. I went away for a while. I continued the family business and wound up getting caught here. Gus Ryback was our pro bono lawyer at that point, although he wasn't pro bono. I wound up going away for a while. And when I came home about 11 years ago, Sisko was there. He was one of the first guys I came to see. And Noah, he was right there the whole time. Noah used to come visit me. I went to see Sisko, and he pulls out some pictures of my mother in an airboat with loads on the back. A couple airboats coming up through the Glades from Florida. And he held it. He said, "This is my favorite picture, but I really want you to have it." And he gave me that picture, and he lit his joint. And he laughed and told me some more stories. And he was there for me when I came home. He was always there for me. He helped me. I had a girlfriend who was kind of hooked on, whatever, and we wound up doing Ibogaine treatment in Mexico. He helped facilitate that. He was just such a caring individual and such a part of life. And the few people here that know him for that long, the people that know him for 40 plus, 50 plus, know the things that he did were not just normal things. The man helped stop governments from being overthrown. He knew kings in Africa. He worked in the craziest places, in the craziest countries. He was such a well-spoken, humble guy. He was really unbelievable. He always had a pearl of wisdom to help me along the way. And I'll never forget him for that. I just think of him with my mom. They were always a team. He tells just one story, I'm done, about he was sitting in somebody's house and they were doing a deal, and the door rang, and it was my mom. And he looks up at my mom and says, "Oh, I just lost $1 million, because my mom took the deal." And he always told me that story. So I just never forget that. I guess that's when he fell in love with her, whatever they had. But he was such a special guy. He loved his son, Death. Loved you, Noah, so much. He was a good Jew. He really was a good Jew. It's crazy. But I love him. Yeah, it's good to see. People up here. And long live Sisko. I love you forever. Light the joint.
Sisko forever.
Hi, I'm Shlomo Ariel. I grew up in Israel. My father was Tuvia Ariel, Harold, one-legged Harold. And Cisco and him were great friends. My father grew up here.
You're one-legged Terry's?
Sorry. So for me, Cisco,
AJ is not.
Yeah, AJ is not here. So for me, Cisco was Uncle Cisco. My father had two brothers, but Cisco was my real uncle. Since I was a baby, he's been around. He came to Israel. He would visit. It was always a great thing for our family. When Cisco would come, I had 4 sisters, and every time he would come, we'd get super excited. He was our fun uncle. It's not, old Ibogaine stories. Everything is not the way we knew him. We just knew him as the great uncle who would always come and bring us presents, and just the biggest gift was he was always so happy and so joyful. And I know him as one of the most fun people I ever knew in the world. And he would always come and make us happy, and so close to my father, and something with them, they had like a resemblance between them. And my father passed away when I was 13, right after my bar mitzvah. And when Cisco came a year later, and he made me also read for him some of my parts. I did the beginning just for him. He came, he visited us, and he would talk to me. And he told me, your father, he would be happy, to see the. It would mean a lot to him. And he had like this smile. He didn't say it in a sad way. He said it like in a happy way. Like it didn't depress me. It was like saying it where it uplifted me. And it meant a lot. So Cisco for me was the last piece of my father, which I had, with me, which reminded me, which told me story about it. Gave me the gift of a cousin Noah, which is I'm very close with and love him. And I came to New York, and when I was done with the Army in Israel, I was 22, and I was here for a year, and I stayed a bit with Noah, with Cisco, and I was go between them, and it was so important to me the way he looked at me. I came here, I did pretty well. I was saving money for college to go back to Israel, study computer science and whatnot, and he looked at me and said, your father would be so happy. You can't believe what the route that how you're doing so well. And when my father passed, I know that Cisco, he helped us out. A lot of my father's friends helped out, but it wasn't only something financial. I had an uncle. Cisco was an uncle. He was a piece of something. I didn't have a father figure. It wasn't a father figure, but he was an uncle to me, and it was important to me. And I take it with me. Those words that he said to me, those twice when I was 14 and 22. Your father would be happy. That's how I want to remember him. I don't want to get depressed or sad when I think about him. I want to live through that uplifting spirit that he had. I want to take them to be happy and to bring joy to roots like he used to bring to them. And just take that piece of me every time I feel that I'm being a bit of an asshole. I'm not caring enough about other people. To be more like Cisco and my father, I think, where they would care about other people and how do I help other people? How do I uplift them? And that's how I will relive Cisco, is by just trying to be a better person and helping people out, even if I get nothing out of it, especially if I get nothing out of it, because it's important to think about the Zula. And I'll miss him. Me and my family are very grateful for Noah, for what he's done for the past year. He took care of Cisco, and it's priceless. And Noah, thank you so much. You've been an amazing son to your father, and really, I know what it feels like to see your father in his dying moments. I know what you're going through. It's been very hard for me the last 2 weeks. I didn't think it would hit me that hard. I'm very sad without him, but like I promised to myself, I'm not going to be sad. I'm going to be happy and bring joy the way Cisco did, and I'll leave you with that. So thank you. Well, don't completely go away.
Hey, Billy,
There's a couple of points. Because, Cisco would want to complete the job. He would want to complete the mission. And the mission is uncompleted right now. So I'm just going to tell you about a couple of things you might be able to help them. We are trying to manufacture the supplement, the Ivo Plus. We reconstituted a little bit. We're going to sell a CBD pill because CBD is good for people with different strengths of iodine. And this will be not FDA approved. This will be basically a gray market product made in another country and sent via FedEx to countries where it's legal. A lot of places.
And maybe that, I don't remember what her name was, that lady in Quebec will not stop us this time. You know? The other thing is there's two important things. Number one, I went and testified to city council Tuesday or Thursday, June 30th. And they, well,
She said she would call.
I don't know, you'd have to turn this on if you want. But let me finish, because this is just two. Yeah. This is like just 2 things, and I don't want to get, well, like, the crowd, half the crowd is back eating. Number one, the city is open as part of a vastly expanded overdose prevention effort involving $280 million of SACR settlement money to open a psychedelic detox room. And this will be ibogaine, ayahuasca, and ketamine. And there's a doctor involved named Perez, and there's a friend of ours, named Dimitri Bourdianis, who's done 500 ibogaine treatments. And he's got to get a big space, basically. And we had to finish writing a document for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. But I was really shocked that they said yes. You know, they said yes. Basically, you can go get ibogaine somewhere. And because there's risk in taking it, they will configure an overdose prevention center for us to bring our ibogaine to take under supervision, you know, and, you know, somebody take me to the hospital. The other thing is, I've been in a place for 8 years now since I got out of jail. And the rental, or it wasn't a rental, but I was squatting the rabbi's apartment at the top of Military Center Synagogue. The marshals are coming to take us out. So we have to think of a new place where we could do the National AIDS Brigade, we could do Church on Mars, we could do Yippies, we could do an ibogaine company, a live work space. So if you know of any place like that in Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn, tell me about it right away, as we can get time from the judge, as long as we're actually moving it. We're actually moving, right? If we're not actually moving, eventually we'll be up the street. So, what?
What did you say this week?
We're being evicted.
This week?
Well, they're gonna come in the next week, and then we have to take the paper they give us, send it to the lawyer goes to court and gets another state. But it
has nothing to do with it. Tell me.
if we didn't do anything at all, we would be told. So you can get involved in any of the levels of this. And I'm especially interested in looking for people who want to invest in the supplement. So maybe you know somebody who has money that they want to put in ibogaine. I will talk to them. But we were supposed to go till 9 o'clock. I'm gonna see what is happening here. Do you want to run her through this thing here? Hello? Claire?
Dana, I'm stepping out for 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
What?
Do you have additional stuff you want to say?
Never front of fronts. as Bob would say. I really don't have much more to say. I can't speak for Bob. I have so much in me, but I just can't speak the way he spoke, All I can say is that he was a very important human being, and one of the most important things is that he was working for GMP Ibogaine so that studies could be done. And that is an incredibly important issue that we need to focus on in this movement and carry on for his
We are.
lineage on.
We found a new, at least potentially a new manufacturer for replaceable lending.
That's
So,
beautiful.
Let's see if it works. If you can find people who want to put money into it, all the better.
Well, the thing is that Bob had energy, he had energy from a higher source that despite all of his health conditions and his age, and he could have just have easily said, I'm tired. I mean, he would fly to India all the time, and he worked so hard and talked to so many different researchers. And it's like, we really need that energy. And I think that Bob was one human being that many human beings will need to come together to make up the energy that Bob had on his own.
Well, maybe some new people will burst upon the scene, some 20-year-olds.
There's a whole new young
brilliant.
generation. There's a whole new young generation that are very animated and doing really great work. And there's studying going on. There's research going on. There's the ICER study that's going super well. I don't know what's going to happen with MASH and the Demorex study, but there are movements forward, and there's more Iboga growing on the planet ever than there used to be. Not a scarcity anymore. This is an exponential growth that Howard, I don't think.
Well, Claire?
Yeah.
You should help me with the conference in Amsterdam. Help me get it organized. Let's make it interesting.
Okay, well, it's a short time period, for a conference.
Well, no, I've got about 6 major workshops lined up, but I'll tell you what they are, and you can give me some advice.
Okay,
on
well,
what
let's talk. Let's Zoom privately. The best is Zoom.
All right.
Can you do Zoom if I send you a Zoom invite on the computer?
Well, I don't want to do it tonight. I want to do it tomorrow.
No, I can't do it tonight either. And I'm traveling.
What's a good time to try to set something up?
Well, I'm traveling tomorrow, and so once I get settled, I'll send you a message, and we can set things up.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Oh, someone did that. Yeah, your name that. Oh, you read this. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know she is.
But I had nowhere to go. So I was like, and I don't know what happened. I know you.
Sisko came to my first party because I needed him to verify each other. I paid for what's going on? You don't like me going to jail, you know? And the guy said, oh yeah, I'm also happy to party tonight. And this story is all over.
I know, I got
somewhere in our travels. We know where it's from.
Rachel.
Jane, church funeral. Oh, yeah, you've been there. You've been there. Looks like it might be. I heard. Oh, man, wouldn't you be? How stupid.
Take picture of the picture.
Yeah.
They always show that picture. They were treated.
It's a good spot to hide it.
Yeah, oh, that's my
Eat it.
side. Protect your side.
Okay, very good. Keep your magic together.
Yeah.
Let's see. Fix some chairs. I lost it. Yeah, I know. Like that. The rabbi and the reverend. I'm a satirical reverend. Right. He's satirizing televangelists. Oh, yeah, he was the best. Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce satirizing every single time you say creative. I saw it. Not him, but I saw shake. That's gutsy for a Jewish kid. That was way back. Oh, he's a mentor. I think they good Howard people. Lenny's protege. And he did a great job.
We don't count.
Succeeding. I saw Lenny on the old Playboy. Playboy. And yes. You're so far. No. What did they say? Which one is smart?
Someone dropped their phone?
Is that there?
It might be data. The thing was sitting there a lot. Okay, I thought it was four.
Two of them like are iconic figures. And I was just very curious.
Good luck.
You remember the that smoking jacket, that pipe, and girls dressed up like bunnies. Nowadays, it was
Cisco wanted his free Gary McGivern song played at this thing here. Cisco wanted his free Gary McGivern song played.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can, we can still do it right now.
Play the Gary McGivern song here. CD's in here.
Somebody's gonna be happy every day.
Oh, really?
Paul gave the best explanation. He ran something. Yeah. The best explanation. People understand. No, he wanted this played at his memorial. The problem is, it's before anybody can say anything or introduce each other. They started the Zoom thing, man. I was telling you to give it a few minutes.
No, was this thing fit in there?
Maybe. I don't know. Oh, I thought you were gonna pass the hat and get a ride. Now he's sitting up, I wouldn't know. That's not even our kind of sold up to get on sides? Yeah. It's all right. We'll work something out. We'll get you home, all right? I was gonna give my friend a ride, but maybe we'll just take the train or something. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out, Eric. Don't worry about it. Play. Gonna put on Cisco's glasses. Is it on? Oh yeah, we're just trying to get.
Are we listening to the tape or the CD?
No, the CD is the better one. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not mansplaining to you. Everything I've said, you know better than me. It's obvious. And yet I continue to shout it.
Keep song 4. Yeah, this is what he wanted played. This is what he wanted played.
Still ain't forgiven for a crime which he didn't commit. So we locked there in prison for Gary McGivern for the rest of his life he may live. Oh, they never forgot about the time he got shot when the prisoner tried to escape. When the prisoner tried, a deputy died, but the inmate he met the same fate. So the girl lay dead, the cops that was dead were out to make a big show. Their vengeance was great till the top to her name. This time someone just had to go. So the killer lay slain, someone had to be slain to be put on trial for his life. Someone to be tried for the cop who had died, and Gary McGivern was right. After a while, he was brought up to trial. The newspapers having a ball. In a private debate, they decided his fate. Set an example for all. Gary still ain't forgiven for a crime which he didn't commit. So he lost there in prison for Gary McGivern for the rest of his life he may live. When they back in court, retribution is strong with the life of an innocent man. The DA is there, demanding fair. The judge will oblige to be fair. Gotta be more respect for the law. The judge keeps it by and by. What I'm feeling, Gary McGivern, I said this here by design. To the best of bedroom, and the convicts still shave off his hair, strap it into his chair, to be murdered in Spain by the street. Nothing was left but that cold chair death, that way Free from the electric jet beer, on the hand of their call. Gary McGibbon, together for a time we didn't commit. So I rock there in prison for Gary McGibbon, for the rest of his life he didn't from the fate of the sheriff, when the law of the land was crucified. The chair was rejected when his hands connected, but Gary still jailed and confined. 15 years ago, and the bishop is that for a crime which he didn't commit. No chance to wrong, innocent wrong, in prison for life we must be. There's only one man with the stroke of his hand, with the power to set Gary free. But the governor of New York, he refuses to talk about granting him clemency. The people must think that they won't tolerate injustice like this anymore. So write him and tell him to free Gary McGibbon, free him forevermore. Gary McGibbon, he still ain't forgiven for a crime which he didn't commit. No, he's not there in prison for Gary McGibbon, with the rest of his life he may spend. For Gary McGibbon.